Good afternoon, everyone. And as you can see, I've apparently turned into a bird. You can see Blue Mage, the weapon matches, everything. Don't worry about me actually being able to target them by just mousing over. It's totally not me. Hey Tracy, hey Licky, hey Sharo, hey Geisel, and hey hey Emir. I hope you're all doing well. Right. I hope you, and hey Santo, I hope you all had a good patch week last week here on this channel, as some of you participated in or observed. We did the new Hildebrand stuff. Got some new relics. So far I have 3. I have the warrior one, the sage one, and the black mage one. And then we did all of the variant dungeon stuff in one stream, which of course led it to go way over time. Which is funny, of course, rather than annoying, hopefully. I thought it was funny. So I have a whole bunch of clips this time, actually. I don't know if we can manage to do everything, but some of them are fun. And some of them are reviews. And we'll take it from there. Hey, Rhaenys! Yeah, I remember you. Thank you for checking in. I hope you're doing well. Right. So as usual with these tea time streams, if there's something you would like to talk about, ask about Final Fantasy XIV related, or maybe not even Final Fantasy XIV related, this is a great time to ask or talk about it. And aside from that, the only other thing that I typically plan for these is looking at some clips or things that you have sent that you would like me to check. Which can be something funny that happened in a dungeon or a raid for you or your friends. Something you thought was so funny that you wanted to make a clip out of it out of one of my streams. That is also okay. We have some of those. Or maybe you would like me to review some of your gameplay, see if I can find something you could do better. I'm not always able to do that, especially if you're sending maybe a savage encounter. Then the best I can do, if I don't actually know the entire strategy of that encounter, the best I can do is try and figure it out in the moment, and maybe give some advice. But general combat advice is something that I am pretty good at. Hey Lemon, I hope you're doing well. Santos says, I really have to get tomes for some of the relics, since they're best in slot for top and DSR. Oh wow! Having to go from step 0 to step 3 is a bit annoying. Well, I will say that you could have anticipated that. The relic weapons are always going to become best in slot eventually. If the final stage of the relic weapons allow you to freely customize them like the Shadowbringers do, then they will probably also become best in slot in all other old ultimates, because it means you can basically cap out all of the stats. That is almost guaranteed, I think. So this one goes out to anyone trying to optimize old content at all, whether it's Ultimate, Savage, or otherwise. If you're doing anything synced, relic weapons tend to become best in slot. Like, either they are best in slot or they become best in slot as they upgrade. And it's usually the newest fully upgradable one that will be the best one. And the reason for that is simply that, so you can see the stats on gear. We've talked about this on previous streams, but I'll go over it as many times as it is interesting. The stats on gear are, you can see the crit and the piety and all this. If I open this meld window, you can see here, the available materia enhancements basically showcase how many stats you actually can have on the item. This is dictated by whether the item is high quality or not. If it's high quality, that adds like an extra 10%. But it's given how the game works, you should typically view it as a normal quality item is 9 to 10% worse than a proper item. Generally, once you get past like level 50, you don't really want to use normal quality gear because of this. But if we look at this, the main thing that dictates the limitations here is the item level. When you get downscaled in a dungeon, this is actually what is being reduced. Like the thing on the right, you know, it says 159 here / 176. If you drop down to like level 50, like, I don't know, like Snowcloak, then this number might actually be like 40 or 30, maybe 50. But it still says 159 on this side, so it will just, you know, how it looks when you put in a materia that it can't fit, you know, red text, you only get some of the benefits, all of that. That is basically what happens when you get synced down. Plus, materia are turned off entirely. Like, materia does not work on synced equipment. So if you're making your best in slot gear set for, I don't know, Unending Coils of Bahamut, which I believe is a level 70 ultimate, and you're wearing like item level 640 gear, there's no point putting materia in it because it's not going to work. Sometimes this leads to extremely funny optimal gear sets where you find the best gear, like the gear that has the absolute highest item level that the ultimate allows, because then you can still put materia in it, which is sometimes better. I believe we're reaching a point where Endwalker gear, like just the armor itself, is so good that it actually beats like genuine level 70 gear with materia in it nowadays. But this is the reason why relic weapons are so good, because at the final stage of most relic weapons, they don't have materia slots. They have fully customizable stats, so you can do something like this that I did to optimize my relic weapon for soloing content for fun, where you can just evenly spread it so that you can like optimize around the particular encounter. Rainer says, I saw you doing the monk level up in the community. What do you mean? The level up guides? I have samurai and reaper guides actually. And there is already a high-level one that accompanies. If you want a specific job guide, I actually even specifically the one job I have not remade a guide for since I started remaking them just around New Year time. The one job I have not managed to remake yet, aside from Monk coming out this week, is Black Mage. But even then, I have guides for Black Mage already that are still up to date. So I have guides for all jobs. If you need a starter guide or an advanced guide, I have them. It's just that the newer ones tend to be, I got better at making videos since. But I already have them. Hey Marketer, how are you doing? Santo says level 90 gear but with good substats is best for level 70 ultimates. Exactly. Phil says when my static was gearing up to try Ubu a few months before 6.2, I was going to play Monk and had nightmares getting gear to hit 1.93 GCD without Greased Lightning 4. Is that a thing? Is that a thing to still aim for 193 without Greased Lightning 4? Is that something that you do? Oh, of course, Lemon. I am going to make new Black Mage guides, of course. It's just that the Monk ones came first. See you, Tracy. Enjoy your day. Yeah. And Cheryl's here. Thank you. I don't know if it is, Phil. I think the important thing to consider is that at level 90, getting 193 GCD is relatively cheap. Relatively cheap. Let me see. I actually have 193 on my Monk. You might be wondering why that is. And how much did that cost me? I just have a crafted set. I have 2, 4, so these could have been direct hit or determination materia, and these could be too. But there's actually no item that I'm wearing where I had to actually sacrifice crit to get skill speed. And that is the important bit. If you have to sacrifice crit, it tends to not be worth it. And let me actually check that. There's a website for this. Let's see, level 70. Right, so your GCD starts at... Well, it's going to be difficult because there's no specific entry for 212. It's actually difficult because there is no 212 to compare to. But you would need significantly more skill speed, twice as much, maybe even more than that, to reach 193. Santo says, with full 640 crafted gear, get 195 GCD with 0 skill speed materia for Monk. Just food and it'll be 194, though on Samurai the same set gives 213, which is slightly too fast. The thing is that if you have the wrong frame rate on your computer, then your 194 might as well be 195. That's why it's often recommended to go for 193. I go over this in the high-level Monk guide. And yeah, exactly, Phil, because the materia wouldn't work. You would have to have a lot of skill speed items. And the thing is, it comes down to how much crit are you losing. And that is like the reason why it matters for Monk that it's crit that you're losing is because of things like Bootshine that makes Monk scale slightly better with crit than normal like other jobs. Yeah, as Santo says, you might be able to just pick items with crit skill speed on it. But the question is, does Monk actually benefit more from having... So if you have Greased Lightning 3, so the big difference here is that Greased Lightning, Enhanced Greased Lightning 2 is only 15%, which means your base GCD is 2.12. Is it worth it to, like, get so much skill speed that you get to 194 or 193, whatever you need? Or is it actually better to get that in Determination and Directed and aim for like a slightly slower rotation? Then you need to deal with a slower rotation, but that's like that is a potential danger of playing Monk at lower than level 76, right? What do you mean, Rhaenys? Is the character, is it Horns or is it Ears? Is it my character that is Horns? Gazel says, if, let's say, I'm going for the Dragon Kick rotation. The Dragon Kick rotation actually used to scale better with crit than the proper rotation. It's just that it started at such a disadvantage that it wasn't feasible to beat the proper rotation. That is to say that it's probably still better to follow the correct, like the same stat distribution as the proper rotation. It's just that you're using an inferior rotation. As I said, like I made the video on the Dragon Kick rotation as a funny video, not to demonstrate a good strategy. That's why I end on, oh yeah, it would be better if you could get this, which you can't. Right. Yeah. What are those two pieces, Santo? I think that is the very interesting question, is what are those pieces? I think... Let's see here. Oh, that is very weirdly written. Or okay. Is that is extremely weird. Pacifist Circlet +2 melded with 1 crit and 1 direct hit. Augmented Lost Elegant Gloves of Striking melded with 2 Determination. That is that is very, very weird. Very weird. Yeah, speed is always complicated. The reason why I immediately go, are you sure that it's actually good to go for 193 with at level 70, is because the thing is with stats is that they scale with each other. So and your perfect balance windows, they don't actually like, the perfect balance windows are always going to be the same value. If you can fit the Masterful Blitz within Riddle of Fire and Brotherhood potentially, then you're good. Like, that's fine. that might require some skill speed, or you have to start your perfect balance before you use Brotherhood. Things like that. But the biggest part of the perfect balance itself is the Masterful Blitz at the end. Yeah, the head is from Eureka. Very strange. But despite that oddity, you also have to remember that Determination and Direct Hit increases the value of the perfect balance itself, and the value of all of your attacks for that matter. That is the common problem that speed as a stat faces in Final Fantasy XIV, is like, most cooldowns don't scale with speed. So your burst window, like, which tends to be important, has to be maximized, and speed usually doesn't help that much with that. That's why a lot of jobs don't really care that much about speed. For Monk and Samurai, the key thing is that you want to land at a specific spot in your rotation when your burst comes up. And for Monk, at 193, the 2-minute burst, like, if you're doing it perfectly, Riddle of Fire comes off cooldown right after, like, a boot shine or something like that on the 2-minute burst. Like, I'm pretty sure that it goes like Dragon Kick, True Strike, Snap Punch, Boot Shine, Riddle of Fire, Perfect Balance, Twin Snakes, Dragon Kick, Demolish, Boot Shine, Perfect Balance. And if your GCD was 2 seconds, then it wouldn't do that. Then you would be at a different point in your rotation. The thing is that when you're trying to be like, to figure out where you are in your rotation in 2 minutes with both boss mechanics and there's a perfect balance in the middle somewhere, it can get very complicated to calculate precisely without, like, writing it out. And the reason for this specific GCD is almost certainly related to this. That the perfect, like, alignment with your Boot Shine and Dragon Kick with Riddle of Fire is very important. In my experience, it doesn't line up quite as well with the odd-minute Riddle of Fire, but that is significantly less important because you have 20 seconds to use Phantom Rush. So it doesn't matter that much. Yeah, exactly, assuming full uptime. But if your GCD is 2.12, then you might, like, that adds a lot of time. Maybe you will have the same experience that you land on Boot Shine or Dragon Kick, just like you use those just as Riddle of Fire comes off cooldown at 205 or 208 or 210 or whatever. Like, things like that. So you might have a cheaper GCD breakpoint that you can work with. Okay, Rhaenys, enjoy. I don't know if it has that. And Matthew says Ubu is also the complete opposite of full uptime, so that also matters. Now I'm you know, just stating this as, like, you know that the GCD that you need can vary depending on where you're starting. As in, if your GCD is 212, then you might want a slower breakpoint than 193, and it's just really expensive to reach 193 or 194. So maybe Determination Direct Hit of some amount is better, and based on what Santos said with the BIS list, it seems like the answer is partly yes to that. And there's Emir. Yeah. It is interesting. I think it's really funny how old content, like downscaling you in this way, especially ultimates where you're not even allowed to do it unsynced, leads to these really strange optimizations. Like you actually need to care about how gear works when you get synced. I think that is like really funny, and it lends itself really well to how, you know, a lot of content in Final Fantasy XIV that you do on the daily is synced. And often you will never need to get acquainted with this, like you never need to figure out, if I go into like Cutter's Cry, what is the best gear in the game for that? Like, who cares? Oh, you already got the new emote. Where is that? But it isn't something that you need for most content, because usually if it's outdated content, you can just do it unsynced and it's fine. It's just ultimates that force you to learn it, right? To learn how this works. And sometimes it's nice to know. Like, for example, in my video about how materia melding matters, I don't talk that much about the fact that materia gets like downscale, like materia gets turned off when you downscale. But it's like a detail, right? It's a good thing to melt your gear, but it mainly came up because some players went, actually, I think it's a good idea to melt your gear when you're leveling up as well. But counterpoint to that is, if you're doing, you know, any content where you get synced, then your materia doesn't work, which kind of defeats the purpose. On the other hand, if you have crafters and you can melt your own gear, then it doesn't cost you anything. You just put the materia in, when you level up, get better gear, you take materia out, put it in the next set. Completely free. So if you land in gear that you're not synced down to, hey, well, then you have better gear than everyone else. Infel says, a friend of mine always gets super upset when he gets synced down like 10 item levels, and because the materia don't count his GZDs off. Exactly. That is also why some jobs I don't like too much doing like synced content with. Specifically, like if you care about your GZD being very specific, then it's really brutal to get synced down, and this is especially true for Samurai and Monk. Most other jobs are not like, well, Gunbreaker cares if you're like, you have skill speed, you're running with a 9 GZD no mercy window, then if you suddenly get downscaled and then your GZD is like 248 instead, and now it doesn't work, and things like that. That sucks. Which again doesn't help for speed, because most of these jobs that can like use speed in some way often can also get away with not using speed, like all tanks, all healers actually. Like some of the healers benefit really well from speed, but they don't need it. Mages, ranged, physical, it's pretty much just Samurai and Monk over there that's like, I need this specific amount. Licky says, ever since Endwalker I've made my own best in slot. The speed that was comfy for me in the first Savage tier was, on spreadsheet, 1.3 DPS lower than the optimal gear. And that is actually also a very good lesson for those that are worried about best in slots. Is, yes, if you do something really funky with your gear, then you might lose like 1% damage or more. But most of the time, best in slot is like really small amounts. Like something that I looked into was like whether you're using, like on a healer, whether you're using, like if you're melding determination on your gear instead of direct hit, just as an example, you're losing out on like 0.5%, maybe 1% DPS, something like that. Maybe slightly more, slightly less, depending on your group composition, depending on your luck. But we're talking 1%. Now, the reasoning for why you do that is because having 5% more healing done, for example, isn't actually going to like the healing you gain from using determination instead is not going to change that much. In most situations, you're going to cast the same amount of spells anyway. You're going to cast the same amount of abilities anyway. It's very unlikely that the reason that you're wiping is because the white mage has 2% less determination than they were supposed to. Could have had, right? And as Matthew says, piety versus everything else matters. The rest doesn't. Yeah, if you had, like, for every point of piety you have, like, non-damage, right? So, like, crit increases your damage, determination increases your damage, directed increases your damage, spell speed, or skill speed, depending on your job, increases your damage. Piety does not. For tanks, you could also argue that it also applies to tenacity, but not quite as much. Because tenacity is 29% worse than the other stats at improving your damage. Or rather, the other stats are 40% better at increasing your damage. Which means that it's similar to, like, for every 5 points of for every 5 points of tenacity you have is... No, wait, I'm confusing myself here. I don't think I can math that in my head right now, but basically, your tenacity is just worse determination. Unless you need the damage reduction, which in most cases you don't. So, as Matthew put it, the comparison between the stats does not matter that much. The reason why crit is like the prevailing winner of the priority lottery is simply because crit scales like this. So the more you have of it, the better it becomes. But it starts lower than determination and directed. If you like fully stack crit in a vacuum, so if we ignore all of the effects that scale with crit and just go, well, a crit does X% more damage X% of the time, then crit is like about equal to determination or directed when you max it out completely. Like every gear piece has full crit on it and everything. But then you remember that most groups will have like some sort of crit boost, like a Scholar's Chain Stratagem or a... is it Dragoon? A Dragoon's Battle Litany. And depending on what job you are, you might get Devilment from the Dancer. Maybe you're a job with a guaranteed critical hit and things like that. And those make you scale better with crit than usual. And you might not need more than one of these. If you just have one, then crit scales better than determination. Like, that easy. Yumia says, is that a new glam from maiming? No. I'm pretty sure I've used this for both my Dragoon and my Reaper video. Licky says, does Bard have a crit buff? Yes, they also have a crit buff, but it's 2%. 2%. But yeah, I forgot about that one. But yeah, all of these things make crit better. Because crit, the stat, increases the chance and the value of your crits. Ironically, a bit weirdly, the existence of raid buffs that improve your direct hit chance actually makes direct hit, the stat, worse. The reasoning for that is that if you have 10% direct hit, that means that you're on average gaining 2.5% more damage from your direct hit compared to if you didn't have it. Which means that if you then gain another 10% direct hit, then that would jump to 5% more damage instead of 2.5%. But obviously, going from doing 100% damage to 102.5% is a bigger increase, relatively speaking, than jumping from 102.5 to 105%. And I hope that makes sense. However, if you then go over and remember that, around a third of the time, if you have a bard in your group, you just have 3% direct hit. And like every burst, you just have 20% direct hit. So on and so forth. Then direct hit as a stat is just worse because you get some of it for free. Like, because it has like almost like a base amount, it just makes the stat worse, because why would you invest in it when you get so much of it for free? That is also what makes determination additionally slightly better than direct hit. Does the new mount have the speed thing again? Does the new mount that came out also come with the classic extra speed thing that occasionally happen? Rhinus, you cannot post links in the chat, just for your information. So you have to explain to me what it is that you saw. Ymia says, where did you get your pants? Which ones? These? Like the pants on this set, or did you mean the other set? Which set? Aiming. Those are from Drowned City of Scala. You can also, I believe the level 84 crafted set is like a recolor of it. But you can't even see the pants. The shoes, on the other hand, are replica Sky Pirate's shoes of healing, which I use for many of my sets. You can see, look like this. Is that the new mount, everyone, that Rannis just described? Well, then there you go, Rannis. We're literally just talking about it. Right. Should we take a look at some clips then? Or some, yeah, some clips, I suppose. The first one that I would like to check is, there's actually sound on that, but I turned down the volume a bit. Licky sent an actual like video. You can see that it appears that a lot of stuff is happening here. Enjoy your work, Phil. Yeah, this is in P12S, and I got a glimpse. I think it's a case of snapshotting that goes in a very, very interesting way. I had to look it through because there's sound. I needed to check if everyone's being very nice in the chat, in their voiceover. Hey, Floss, I hope you're doing well. But let's see. So I'm pretty sure it's something with the Dragoon. Did you see that?
Why did you do that?
How and why?
Did you see it?
You're active across the ground the entire time, you absolute pleb.
Oh my god.
So it happens, you can see Loki over here. And they do the elusive jump. Let me just see. There's a tank buster charging up right now. it should have finished now. Like, that is when the snapshot should have happened, right? But it appears that now is when the snapshot happens, because that is the only way to explain that the Dragoon dies.
Why did you do that?
Pretty good, isn't it? Nice snapshot. So yeah, that is why be careful, because snapshots are weird. Very weird. But like, it's like, we're talking like single digit frames of difference. Like, if the Dragoon had just waited like 10 frames with using their elusive jump, then it might have been fine. Yeah, I thought that was really funny. That was really good. Always a Dragoon. Yeah, well, I think most other... I don't even know why. I'm guessing they had to get over there for a mechanic. I'm guessing that is the reason. Licky says he had been trying that for the last 8 pulls or so. It was just trolling. Oh, okay, so maybe it was testing the snapshot? And Kasavi says some fights have very strange snapshotting, like some have extremely early and extremely late snapshots. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Reynes, I did actually see the new emote. The Advent of Light. I feel like it's like the classic hero landing thing. Right, so I have some more clips. Some clips Nelva took from some recent Small Kai streams. They're very short. Just to start with these, I've like put the funny clips first. Not everyone might find them as funny, but I will go over them just the same. So we were doing the Black Mage quest here, and we just pop out of. Let me just turn down the volume a little bit. We come out of the cutscene, and I believe Nelva is literally there with a sword. Ouch. Very perfect impaling, isn't it? Yeah, right. Nelva was right there with a blade. Yeah, I think that was the specific thing. Lala on a stick. Ah, yes. Served at your local fair. Lala on a stick. Lala on a blade. The other one is this one, where we were doing some more Black Mage stuff. There was a bunch of silliness from this particular quest line, I suppose. Me as a bit far-fetched. That's a Pokemon. I mistrust neither your motives nor your skill, Lady Shatoto, but as a hero charged with the protection of this wood, I cannot leave this matter to you alone. I will accompany you, and me as a bit far-fetched. That's a Pokemon. Ah yes, that's a Pokemon. Far-fetched. Shish kebab. Lala kebab. Let's see, Matthew says the raid wight after the intermission in that fight, both normal and savage, is early. Or the damage is late, if you want to think about it like that. Yeah, that is a common problem with mechanics where you either cannot see a cast bar at all, or there's no telegraph for an attack. Then it's often nearly impossible to see when it's supposed to happen, and this is actually more common of a problem in Savage, because many mechanics they decided to cut the telegraph. You're supposed to know where it is now. That's your problem. Which means that like the typical timing of exactly when the attack snapshots is the telegraph disappearing. But if there's no telegraph, this clip from Fila is on the last tea time. I pointed out that they could have used Presence of Mind a lot more, especially on like AoE packs. So there was a little follow-up clip here. Oh, that's very loud, and the sound is a little wonky. Let's see it. There's the proper Dia spreading. And holy there, that was Swift casted, and As Eyes and Presence of Mind, nice. So this is perfect. This is like a perfect pull, right? And perfect from the White Mage perspective. Now the question is, does the Dark Knight ever need healing? No, they don't. Awesome. See now that was nice. We had sharp cast. Well, we had the swift casted. We had swift casted Holy into Azai's Presence of Mind, and I did see it was Azai's then Presence of Mind, which is important because late weaving buffs that affect your weapon skills and spells matter. And then it's just the full Holy spam with no need to stop. A normal, yeah, exactly. Also, a normal swift cast. It wasn't a latency swift cast like we saw last time. Well, the thing is that Dark Knights. Oh, you're. Oh, right. Let me see. There we go. The thing with Dark Knights is that often Dark Knights in like dungeons, they will use TBN at the start, like right when they reach their destination, and then use their defensive cooldowns. But then they typically just like often will just like dump all of their MP on damage, like just immediately. And well, 15 seconds later, do you have MP for TBN again? And the thing is that you might think that that's unnecessary, but I'm just saying that if you're actively taking enough damage, then TBN is like a free 20% HP heal, which is pretty good, right? Like just 20% healing, just 25% healing. Like a quarter of a benediction, pretty nice. And if you just use it on cooldown, then you have more HP to work with, and it's more likely to lead to your healer being able to safely attack, which leads to things dying faster. Like, my recommendation, like, so in a boss fight, it's complicated because there's no reason to spam TBN. Not always will TBN actually break. But if you're tanking like a big AoE pull, the only time TBN will not break during that is if the mobs are literally about to die, and if the mobs are literally about to die, then you will recover that MP anyway, so it's fine, right? It's fine. You won't miss it. But if it breaks, then it means that you're trading instant damage for free healing and instant damage. Like, you're basically going, would you like to buy my $10 for $15? And the person says yes. All you have to do is just keep some MP in store for TBN, which is easier on AoE because Stalwart Soul gives a lot of MP. But a lot of Dark Knights don't actually do that because damage, and then they become a paper mache tank. Like, not only is some of your defensive cooldown budget spent on Dark Mind, which doesn't help you on AoE, you choose to not use your short cooldown. Because reasons. Right. Just a moment. Okay, I wrote down a note on what Sharo requested that we look at, and they said general overview. So we had the sprint correctly. You could, like, if we just go back here, you could start, if you wanted to, you could start sprinting now, for example, and then you would have more sprint. during the pull. However, and I'll get back to that in a moment, after this pull, because that might not be the best choice to wait until the very last second to sprint. That is actually a different optimization. Very good. So what you could have done differently here is if you pulled that mob with Provoke, then you could have used Overpower here. Again, really minute detail, but you see you could have done that. You might even have been able to do it slightly sooner than that. You could have saved half a second is what I'm talking about. It's like nothing, but it's like, you know, it's the small things. If I'm pointing out the small things, then it means there are no big problems, right? Oh, sorry. It's just a little loud. The sound balance is so that I have to put the videos on like minimum volume. Otherwise, it's a little overwhelming. So here's a very good example of why it might not have been a bad idea that Shade used Sprint a little early before. Because if they had waited 10 extra seconds, because Sprint was at 9 seconds left when they entered combat, then Sprint would have been at a 15-second cooldown right now. Now they use Sprint on cooldown here, that is fine. So just for comparison's sake, now is when Sprint would have been ready. If they had used it where I said they could have used it, that would still have worked. However, if they had sprinted there, then the pull itself might have resolved like a few seconds sooner. Maybe not, who's to say? A part of it is also that there's the DPS composition is your group is a Scholar and 2 Bards. They're not the highest personal damage jobs in the game, so the fights might take like a few seconds longer than if it was like, you know, like Dancer Samurai and a Sage or something like that. It's not important, but it's more like those few seconds make a difference in timing your sprint. It's really like, it's as I said, it's really specific stuff here. Like, it's timing your sprint is something that is like excessive optimizations levels of optimization. Like, you don't need that. But if you do it, then you can pull slightly faster. And if you can pull slightly faster, then the dungeon finishes slightly faster. But so far, Shade has not had to sprint in the middle of the pull, losing extra sprint time, which is good. Like, if you can use sprint on cooldown in the entire dungeon, whenever you can like run between packs and make sure that it is used outside of combat, then you get the maximum value. See, there was the sprint immediately after the fight resolved. Nice. Yeah, we have the speed through the boss fight. How about I help you a little bit with that? Now we have ultra speed. 2 bards is a damage loss. True. Like, compared to having a bard and something else, then yeah, absolutely a damage loss. So we have this again, the sprint came. So let me just check that. So the thing is that it seems like the main thing that really stands out here is the sprint. So that's what I'm focusing on. Like, it's, as I said, it's a really small thing, but like, if you want to perfect tanking, then that is also a thing. So this sprint is actually really nice because these mobs pull automatically, if I remember correctly. See, there, they pulled there. So what I normally do with this pack is I don't see many other tanks do that. But what I normally do, and I've told about this before, is that I use Tomahawk on one, then Provoke on another, then Tomahawk on a third one, and then on the fourth one, I will either use Tomahawk on that one, so I'll just run past, and then it'll aggro to someone else, and then I use Tomahawk, and it's fine. Or sometimes I will use, if I'm on Warrior, I will use Upheaval instead of Orogeny. I'll use Upheaval specifically on the fourth one to keep it on me, and then I'll use Tomahawk. It depends. If there's 5 mobs, then I'll probably use Upheaval on the fourth one, and then use Tomahawk on the 5th one. But when we're up at 5 mobs, I'm more likely to just run up and use Overpower. But I'm just saying, that's what I would do. Let's see what Shade does. There was the Tomahawk. the run-up and the overpower. That is the classic. A lot of people do that. And there was also orogeny. That also helps. And there's... Was that... Let me just go back there. We're running past. Which one did you use Tomahawk on first? On that one. So that one. So then you do overpower orogeny. And then you do Tomahawk on the same one. And Tomahawk on the same one. And then you switch target and then Tomahawk on the third one. The first one is the one that needs some help. So the reason why I do the Tomahawk provoke Tomahawk thing that I explained is because Tomahawk does a ridiculous amount of enmity. If you do that, so Tomahawk provoke Tomahawk Tomahawk, even without upheaval, then all 4 mobs are going to stick to you. The only thing that can take them off of you if there's like, I don't know, like a machinist going, I'm going to use reassemble drill and then reassemble air anchor on this mob specifically, and only this mob, then maybe they'll drag it off of you, but it's unlikely. So it's like, it's safe. You don't have to do that on the second pack because you're staying there. But that is the reason why I do it. So like that mob and that mob probably wouldn't have gone off to party with the rest of the group if you had done it that way. So you could practice that. If you can find a place with 4 striking dummies, you can practice and see if you can do it. But other than that, nice. Everything worked out. The important bit here, because it's not a super difficult dungeon. Some of the things that matter more when it's like when like as soon as it's easy and you're not like in danger at all, then like you see there was the perfect sprint again. Are the packs being dealt with as quickly as possible? Can you rush through it? Gazel says, is soil not appearing because you have all effects turned off? That looks to be the case because the buff is there, right? Let me actually just go over that real quick. I would highly advise everyone, public service announcement, do not do this. Do this. The reason why you do this is because if you have it like this, then you can see the white mage use Blood Lily on the target. You can see the black mage just drown the enemy in flames and you can't see anything. If you do this, you can see the white mage putting down Asylum, you can see the scholar putting down Sacred Soil, and the reason why that matters is because I have to go outside to showcase this also. Sound. The reason why this matters is because while this is huge, a boss room is typically just slightly bigger than this, and if the scholar is like weird and just drops it randomly, then you, the tank, might easily stand here, but if you can't see it, actually you have to stand here. It's really like if you stand here, then you're missing it, but you can't even see where it needs to, like where you're supposed to be. Taro says, I have everything on middle or left. That is strange because looking at the footage, sorry, just a moment. Is it like I can't see the Sacred Soil. Maybe it's a console thing? Is that possible? Does anyone know? Because the middle one should allow you to see Sacred Soil. It does. It's a detail. You were in it. So what happened here then? Since you can't see it, like let me just roll it back so we can see. So what Gazel noticed it too and made me aware of it. Right now, Sacred Soil was put down. You can see the buff on the Scholar counting the timer. You have the buff, so you're standing in it. I can't see the Sacred Soil. So I don't know what's happening here, if you say that it normally works. But you can see it too, right? There is no Sacred Soil. Maybe a glitch? I don't know. If you normally can see it, that's fine. It's also just, it was more like a general thing to everyone to not turn off party like effects completely, because the limited one shows the ones that you need to see. And there's also other things that might be like minimally relevant, like being able to see that the Black Mage put down their ley lines, because if you can see that they put down their ley lines, then you know why they're acting weird. Like, can you put it down quickly? Yes, I can. Well, it looks like you can see it. Well, Shade wouldn't be able to trace it perfectly if they couldn't see it. But yeah, I take your word for it when you say that you can see it. All I can say is what we can see, right? We can see that it was invisible on this footage. So there, that one is evil. But in this fight, just minor optimization. When you see the boss do this, that's when you look at your onslaught and go, okay, I have one, I'll keep that, and then you can use it right now, and then you don't get a bone stack. Again, minor detail, right? Oh. Yeah, the boss fights are not ironically not super difficult, right? Caetsu says, I personally keep party effects unlimited and all else off, mostly because I don't want to be bamboozled by other alliance effects. That is actually a good point. That is a good idea, so you don't stand in the asylum that you don't even benefit from because it's from a different alliance, right? Wait. This is actually an interesting point here. So there's no reason to use sprint now because you have to wait for the portal to get over here. Here is an awkward time because there's a long run. You could use sprint, but on the other hand, you have bards, you have peloton. You could just save it. I would personally recommend using sprint here, but again, as I mentioned at the start of this clip, there might be a reason to use sprint early. But the reason why I wanted to use sprint, like actually as you get down at the slide, is because the slide itself eats like 8 seconds of it. It's crazy. Funny story, this pull used to be like a little difficult because the dragons hit weirdly hard. As you can see now, Shade is getting chunked, and then you remember that Shade is a warrior, so it's fine. Yeah, it's the main thing is maximizing the speed through the dungeon. I feel like this has been going really well. Then there's the final dragon. And a single mob. Little comment in the middle. So yeah, you can see here. So let me see if I can keep track of that. So sprint became ready now. So I'll track it with orogeny. So you would have been fine using sprint like 6 seconds later, so then you would have some sprint for the pulling the mobs after the slide, I think. But just as an example. And then you didn't use sprint here, but you could have. But you were probably distracted by the mobs, and then you accidentally pressed limit break. You were accidentally distracted by the loot. I mean, you could still sprint. You still have sprint. You could sprint. You could sprint right now. Now it doesn't matter. But other than that, pretty good. This pack also tends to be a little painful to deal with. But yeah, overall really nice. Most of the packs you remember to use sprint. As I said, the difficult part is like getting like with a dungeon like this. The difficult part is getting through it as quickly as possible, pulling big, making sure your team can keep up. Don't sit on your cooldowns if you need one, things like that. And overall, it went well. I just want to check something because there's a really... Oh, nope, we're not doing that. So I just want to... It's a little difficult because it's sped up here, but I just want to take a moment to look here. Okay, so everyone in the party is attacking the ad. So that is the important part, because if no one is attacking the ad, you're fine. Because if it explodes, you just get a vuln stack, but the boss isn't actually dangerous enough to warrant worrying about that in most cases. But if anyone's attacking the ad, it's better to just kill it and get it over with, because it's waste to like let it waste one player's time like that. Like, it's better to just work together on it, but if everyone agrees on ignoring the ad, then that is actually faster. Like, ever so slightly faster than killing it, because you save a few seconds, right? Like, it's, again, ridiculous optimization. But it's more like a fun fact. You can actually block the vulnerability stack by Scholar Shields or Sage Shields, if you like. Might be easier for Sage because they have things like Holos or Panheimer, where a Scholar kind of needs to use Sucker, typically. Yeah, it was nice with the speed up. Especially if like you know what you want me to look at, then you're speeding through the stuff you don't need me to look closely at is pretty good. I don't know, is Fila here? Just checking. Because I know this clip is a little older, so they'd rather me skipping it or something. You know what? Let's do. Gazel had like a low level run that was mostly like, it's not as much to review, but it was more funny, I believe, like interesting to see, because normally Gazel said they were surprised that there was a big AoE pull in low-level dungeons. So I would like to see that, like how that goes. And there's no sound on this, so let me just go here. Go inside again, so we can have my music. There we go. Hey Liu, how are you doing? You. Right, there's no sound on this. I'm going to set it at high speed because I know kind of what we're looking for is the big pull in general. So Gazel is going over grabbing the information here. Very good. I'm guessing you saw what it said. I hope you did. The pet management. I assume you place... Did you place your pet? Looks like you did. Very nice. That's a very good trick. Especially if the tank continues, because then your pet might fall out of range. There was not a big pull there. Is there a big pull here? Is it 2 packs? Oh, here it comes. Oh boy. Here it comes. Is that it? Okay. That is reasonable, I would say. That is a reasonable pull. That is an interesting pull. Aren't you in combat with the clam from before? You're in combat with that clam. I'm pretty sure you're in combat with some of the clams from before, are you not? Where's your... There's something there that you're out of range of. I'm pretty sure that's one of the clams, and that is a clam. Oh, they actually like they actually de-aggro when you get far enough away, it seems. That I didn't know that. That is interesting to know. Did you just resummon your pet? Did you forget to get it with you? Leo says, thank you for all the rotation guides. Been helping me learn a lot of stuff. Thank you so much. I'm glad you find them helpful. Wait, did you pull the pack with? Oh, okay. I mean, you can do that. I'm assuming this is a random tank. Because if it was someone that knew you, then it would be like a lot more obvious the reasons why they would just go for it. Like, oh well, I know you're good at healing. That was also that might have looked interesting. How the way he pulled that. So just look at this. So that is an archer. So he's not going to follow you. So the only options you have is either pull like around a corner. There's not any good corners in this room, or you have to pull everything else back to the archer, and the tank does exactly that. So this tank is like, this tank knows what they're doing. It's a good tank, which makes it a lot more. It's a lot more comforting when you see a tank pull ridiculously big, if you can see that they know what they're doing, because then you feel confident doing that and pulling for him. Right? Well, at that point you had kind of figured out that you were doing that. And then there's the that was the boss, real quick. They had it at double speed, right? Right. And just pull everything. I would normally do that without the last pack, I think, simply because you don't know for sure with the tank. This pull, however, the tank could have done slightly better if they wanted to. So going to be a little hard to see, but I believe that there's two archers, so that's an archer, and I'm pretty sure there was an archer in the first pack as well, and that's the reason why I'm pretty sure that's an archer. That's why the tank pulled them over there. What he could have done is pull them further back so that this archer comes over to this archer, and then move the entire pack over to the double archers. It's like, again, it's really, really specific, but it would mean that you wouldn't have this awkward archer standing over here. There's also an important detail, is that I don't... With the way that this paladin is playing, it seems like they really know what they're doing. This whole thing with just rushing like that might not have been worth the effort if it wasn't for the fact that both of the DPS are jobs with AoE. If it was like a samurai or a ninja, then they would do no extra damage by pulling all that. So the paladin would basically lock up you, potentially like spam. Oh, that was a very nice transition. Like locking you up, spamming heals potentially, and the DPS are just standing there singling out all of the mobs. Not super helpful, right? Was that a critical adlo? Very convenient. Pedro says, big fan of the channel, always had a question. Any particular reason for the pink aesthetic? And thank you. I also think my character is very cute. Thank you so much. The reason is that I very much like the color. I really like pink. That's the reason. That is basically the reason. I chose to use, like, my character had already glamored everything to cherry pink before I made the channel. Like, there's nothing deeper to it. It's just I like the color. I started, like, using very bright colors when I could in games like this years ago, because it made it easier for me to, like, see my character on the screen. And then I just discovered that I really like this color. And there is a possibility that I originally chose the color because it was slightly outrageous, but then I have at least stuck with it. But thank you so much, Pedro. Well, I just want to point out that the tank, if they really wanted to push it, they could have pulled the extra pack over there. Hey, Sid. I think Regal Purple is better. Well, you have your right to have your preferred color, just like I have my right to have mine. Ah, yes, the yellow pelican. Did you know that Sage can solo this fight? Minimum level synced? It just takes like 15 or 20 minutes of running in circles. I believe you also soloed it with Dark Knight. Well, Pedro, as long as you're practicing, you're bound to get better. So I'm sure you can do it. It also depends on what you're scared of. Like if you're scared of not being tanky enough, then it's a matter of like mastering the cooldowns. Sometimes getting really good at a specific dungeon helps you meter out your cooldowns. Like if you learn, oh, this particular pack is stronger, I should use Shadow Wall here, something like that. That can sometimes make you especially good. The thing is, acknowledging that you might have a lot to learn is a really big step in becoming better in the first place, because as long as you acknowledge that you have a lot to learn, then you will learn more, right? Because you're looking for ways to improve. So I'm sure you will become very good. Or maybe you already are. Oh, this pack is, like, this Mega Pull is always scary. That is the class, like that is a pretty classic run. The scary part about pulling big is like Gazel told me that on Japanese data centers it's not common to pull that big, at least not in low-level dungeons. So the scary part here would more so be the fact that no one's expecting it, rather than it being scary in the first place, right? Like, it's the surprise factor. And the thing is, pulling like giga pulls where you have to run for a long distance in like Sastasha or Bravelock's Longstop is something that in Bravelock's Longstop a Sage can do it because they have Eucrasia. They can just apply shields to the tank if they need it. But for the most part, it is mostly just it's mostly just Scholar that can deal with it because their pet is healing all the time. I think Astrologian has aspected Benefic in Bravelock's Longstop, so that would also work. It's the benefit of having an instant heal of any kind, so that you can heal the tank a little bit as they run. That is what makes the difference, because Embrace is like a permanent region that is just jumping between targets as you need to. Is this with sound? It is. Then I will turn off my sound. So right, Licky does, I believe you do ultimates. Is it as tank or as DPS or both? But Licky sent some footage of P10. You've done DSR as Warrior and Summoner. Well, there you go. The thing is, you can be extremely good at the game and still not have mastered everything, right? A funny story that I've brought up many times is that I have a friend, that they did ultimates. They had done all of the current Savage raid tier, and they were doing ultimates and clearing them. And they regularly played tank, so their main was DPS. I believe they mained Dragoon, but they regularly enough played tank that you'd assume that they knew like pretty well what they were doing, right? They did not know that if you use sprint before you enter combat, it lasts twice as long as if you use sprint when you're in combat. Didn't know it. And that's something that all jobs benefit from. So like, that is such a specific thing, and that was something that I also brought up was important for Sharrow's clip. The thing is, Sharrow did it correctly every time in their run, so there was nothing to point out there about that. but it's more the general idea that sprint is more technical than you'd think. Ricky says, I'm not a healer though. And exactly, so let's see. P10 is actually particularly difficult because of a very specific bit in it. So I'm going to speed up a little bit, because there's a lot of stuff where there's not much happening, so it's better to just focus on when stuff is happening. Also, how long is So there was the pre-pull Eucratian prognosis. That's good. That was also done with Zoe. That is fine. Some people prefer to do that. So nothing's happening right now. There's the double Flemma with raid buffs. That is very nice. Not surprising from a Savage Raider. This mechanic is really chaotic to deal with. Some groups do it just fine. Others, it's just chaos. You want to make sure that these are split up so there's no, like, ties between each other, no tethers. Hey, Gelano, I hope you're doing well. Yeah, you want to split it up, and it's really difficult because there's not a lot of space. The other... Wait, what? How did the tank die? The other tank... No, the other healers cast Aspected Helios. That might have been unnecessary, but I think the tank just ran off the arena. I think they just ran off. Now, the scary part is that the main tank does not have their tank stance on. And we need 6 players for this mechanic. We have 7. Will it be done correctly? The tank has put their tank stance on, so that's good. There was the Swift casted raise. Perfect. I didn't notice any missed cast. However, is your dot on the boss? Now it is. Was for a few seconds, apparently. And there's the donut version. You're expecting it. You've probably done this a few times. You need to use Lucid Dreaming. Like, you super need to use Lucid Dreaming. Oh, there it is. There was a Lucid Dreaming. Excellent. Nice. Kirakoli for that. That is, I would have done the same. Wait, what did you cast? Oh, Fizzes. Right. There's a few big AoEs that look very similar, so it was like, was that Holos? And there's Ixoholy? Was that necessary? There's nothing coming up, so I would have said you didn't need to use Ixoholy there. But that's fine. It's going to be a while before you need to do anything for now, for a bit. So you have time to recover, but you probably didn't need to use Ixoholy there. It could also be that the argument was that you were aggressively using it because of your MP situation. And one of the tanks is doing a very neat trick that I'm pretty sure is like normal specific. I don't think you need to do it like this in Savage because the Savage fight is completely different. But on normal, what happens is you get this mechanic, but now there's 4 instead of 3, and one of them is always on a tank, if I remember correctly. So the trick is, if the tanks run off to one of these corners, then they don't take up the limited space on the main arena. And with only 3, there's plenty of space for everyone. But if there was 4, then you wouldn't be able to do it right. So like, that is a pretty neat trick there. Oh, for a second I thought the shadow there was a player. Oh, that was a nice trick with Icarus. I don't think you needed to do that. Let me just see. Did that? So you're standing here. You could have just run over here. But you could also do that, like, nice tricks, but you didn't have, like, it's just, exactly, that's no fun. It was just an alternative solution. And there, Ixoholy seemed to be necessary. The reason why I don't think Ixoholy was necessary before was both because they got topped up, presumably the Astrologian did something, but you already had both Keracholi and Physis ticking, and they would mostly top up everyone, I'm pretty sure, before the next mechanic. But you didn't use Physis this time, so that now the situation is different. I'm highlighting that because if you do the same thing twice and I don't comment on it the second time, you know, maybe it's because like I missed something or I didn't care or something, but I'm just saying it's because you did something different. So here, for those that don't know, this mechanic is always followed by you need to go over this web bridge. So as soon as you've seen him start the laser there, you can actually run over to safety if he's shooting at the unsafe side. That can save you a little bit. I think it might have been a bad choice to use Panheimer there. Mainly because the mechanic that is coming in a little bit. I think it's coming in a little bit. Or maybe it is so far into the future that it doesn't matter. And dot drops. Dot is up. So this is the mechanic I'm talking about. This is the scary healer mechanic on P10. You probably would want Panheimer for this. The reason for that is because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You could have eased the burden very heavily by saving Panheimer for that. You survived it, which is good. Let me just take that one more time and see what you actually did about it instead of just counting attacks. So the first one, you have Keracholi already up. There's Physis. Second one. Do nothing. No wait, Holos. Wait, did you use Holos and I didn't see it? Let me just see. Is there some latency here? Holos. Right, Holos. And Physis was already up. My bad. And there's Zoe. And Neuma. And was that Ixoholy, right? And just completely cold. I'm fine. I don't need to heal anyone. I'll just attack. You could use Flemmer. Just a moment. Ymir says, can you solo any of the level 80 dungeons? I'm pretty confident that you can. Even with Blue Mage. So I didn't solo a level 80 dungeon, but I soloed Mount Gulg, and it was not difficult. With Blue Mage. Synced. I don't know if that counts. Hey, those brown eyes. I hope you're doing well. And there's the tank mechanic. Does any of the tanks... Maybe one of the tanks is going to need more help with the Vuln stack? Nope. Looks like they're fine. Why? What are you doing? Let me just check my gear real quick. Checking piety. Why? So there's a lot of people congregating here in the middle. The other healer didn't make it. You could probably have made that. You could probably have run there if you wanted to. There's a lot of Vuln stacks. That means the safe spot will be over there. Hey Fila, I hope you're doing well. Actually, I asked about this before. I have your, I believe, the Astrologian clip from Etherfund on the list. Is that still? Does that still seem relevant for you for me to review, or is it a little old? Checking pi is more important than the mechanic. Indeed. Well, you survived, so it's probably fine. The thing that you should have checked instead, Licky, is your lucid dreaming button. You could use lucid dreaming right now. Lucid dreaming, lucid dreaming. You're running out of mana. You need to use lucid dreaming. That's the Icarus again. The same trick even. You're going to run out of mana if you don't use lucid dreaming right now. There it is. Oh boy. And we had the Dragoon use limit break. That is very good. So, just a general thing with lucid dreaming, and I say this in my healer guides, is if your MP is below 8,000, then you can use, and like if you're attacking all the time, then you can use lucid dreaming. It will, like, you will get most of the value out of lucid dreaming anyway. If you want to be really sure, then wait until 7,000. But don't wait until you're at below 50% MP. Like 7,000, 7,000, then use lucid dreaming on cooldown. And Licky says I hadn't used the +1 adder scroll button once. Oh well, that may be as it is. You didn't need the extra adder skull, but if you had used lucid dreaming more, it would have been fine, in my opinion. But yeah, if, like, just a general healer tip, if lucid dreaming is available and you have less than 8,000 MP, just click lucid dreaming. Just go for it. It's fine. The only time where it isn't fine is if you die immediately after. But you might die anyway. Like, you could die at any point, so you can't plan for that. Adder Skull could, like, the extra Adder Skull of Ritsumata could have made the difference, Gazel, but focusing on Ritsumata not being used is inconsequential when lucid dreaming sat for like a good 30 plus seconds when there was plenty of space for it. Because Ritsumata gives 700 MP by virtue of the Adder Skull you could spend, whereas lucid dreaming gives 3,850. One forgotten lucid dreaming is equal to more. It's actually equal to 5.5 Ritsumatas in terms of value. And, well, there would have been more than 5 Ritsumatas in this fight if you had used it on cooldown. But you would have had 9 lucid dreaming. So yeah, that would be my main advice here is more lucid dreaming. You were low on MP. Other than that, everything went well, Licky. So you didn't need more piety. As my advice in my healer guides goes, if you're running out of MP, then your first question should be, am I using my MP recovery right? For Sage, the first question is, am I using lucid dreaming properly? This is actually the question for all healers. Then the second question for Sage specifically is, am I actually using my Adder Skull properly? Like, am I focusing on using things like Physis when I have 3 Adder Skull and I should really use one of them now? Things like that. And then, thirdly, you then move on to go, should I make sure to, like, overspend Adder Skull to make space for Ritsumata sometimes? Like, maybe not overspend, but spend more so that you can get even more MP. But lucid dreaming, if you can just use that one properly, that one is like, I think I calculated it to be worth over 2,000 piety to just use it on cooldown. I think I talked with Gazel about that, so maybe they remember. But it's like over 2,000 piety to use lucid dreaming on cooldown. It's insane. But yeah, you had like 110 piety from your gear, from what I could tell at a glance. You had 510 piety. I'm pretty sure that was like, I'm pretty sure the base amount is 400. Yeah, I would say that is my advice, is look at your MP bar. Is there anything particular you would like to highlight in the other fight, Licky? In the P11 one? Then I can take note of that while we take a look at Fila's clip. Skip bosses? Right, so we focus on just the mob pulls. Yeah, exactly. Shadow says, Red Mage needs lucid dreaming. And Matthew says, view it as money on a conveyor into a volcano. Holding it for later won't help. On a conveyor into a volcano. That's a very good point. But yeah, view it as money. You have a print money button. Just because you can only hold 10,000 doesn't mean you don't want an extra 4,000 over a few seconds, right? Gazu says, I would suggest trying to click Lucid Dreaming anyway when you refresh the dot if you can't keep track of the cooldown. That is also a good tip. And Cheryl says, Adder's Goal is German. For humor. No, wait, fun fact, Adder's Goal in German is humor. Sorry, I'm reading that wrong. I can say that because humor is the same in German as in English. Germans heal you with jokes. Vicky says, not really, I just wanted you to see how bad we legends really are. Well, good point. Not every, like, you don't have to be good at, you don't have to be a master of everything. In fact, you don't, like, you can have the, like, triple legend or however many legend title and still not actually understand how or why you play the job the way that you do. Like, you might just be incredibly good at following a guide. Like, you just memorize a rotation. Like, that doesn't mean that you understand it. So, like, having those titles does not necessarily mean that you're a master of the game. Which is an interesting reason. It's pretty funny how often I've heard stories of people going, yeah, in a dungeon, the most likely player to be bad is the triple legend, especially if they're wearing a Mentor crown. Then you know it's a terrible player or something like that, right? I've heard, like, Savage Raiders or people with legend titles, the reason why they play poorly in dungeons is because they're just relaxing. They're not giving it like 200%. They do that in ultimates. Like, you're focusing on something else, right? Like, well, you're focusing really hard when you're doing the really hard content, and then when you're doing the easy content, because you know it's easy, you're not trying as hard. That is, of course, a little mean to the easy content, because if you gave it a little more effort, it would be even easier, but that is often the reason. There's also the possibility that the person with the ultimate, or the legend title on them, is playing a job they don't normally play. So you're sitting there like, why is the legend player playing so poorly? Well, they've never played Astrologian before, or something like that, right? Matthew says, legend titles make you worse at the game. Maybe. Ottorinth says, the worst part are people who complain about having to do dungeons but still play suboptimally, making it take longer. That is also a really good one. Actually, I have a funny story with that. Let me just put on sound here so that it isn't so quiet. The Pandemonium Trap Mix always works well as background music. So I was in Delubrum Reginae back in Shadowbringers farming relics, like grinding all of them up. I had a run where like a third of the alliance, like of the entire alliance, left. So we were like 16 players, which did not scale down the bosses, which meant that we just all had to work 50% harder. I was using, you know, an optimal essence to maximize my damage. I was using the lost actions to maximize my damage. Then there was this random person in the group that used nothing, no essence, no lost actions or anything, and I'm pretty sure they weren't attacking much. I think they were a healer and they were mainly just casting healing spells. They were the person who said, ugh, it's taking so long, why is it so slow? And I'm sitting there like, you're not helping. Yeah, if you ever get into the loop and regenerate, just remember that if you leave, then the remainder has to work harder because you left. Please stay. Nowadays, the loop and regenerate, I believe it scales to the amount of people that are actually inside when you get in. But I'm pretty sure it doesn't scale down if people leave in the middle. But yeah, absolutely agree, Otterins. When the person complaining about being there is the one that isn't even trying, that sucks. Emia says all the god mentors are in the chat. Sans that one cat girl I had in a dungeon. All the good mentors, sorry. Well, god mentors could also work. It doesn't scale down. It happened to me too. Yeah, exactly. It does not scale down when people leave. I'm pretty sure it scales down nowadays if you enter like the way the loop and regenerate queue works is that after 10 minutes it'll just put however many players have queued for it in and go, good luck. I'm pretty sure it scales down when it does that, but I haven't done it since Shadowbringers, so I don't know. And Licky says the better you think you are, the worse you are. That is actually a really good point, because if you don't think you're super great, there's a good chance that that it's because you know what you don't know. And acknowledging that you don't know something also gives you the opportunity to learn it. Whereas if you think you're the best, then you're less inclined to learn from others, which is not good for your possibility of getting better at the game. Yeah, there's always more to learn. Me putting out videos often gives me opportunities to learn something new, because people go like, oh, actually there's a detail to this thing you said here, or someone goes, oh, there's this funny thing that this specific job does differently here, or someone just adds a story that teaches me something. Like there's a lot of those kinds of things. And me looking up stuff also helps. Like, I have gotten better at reading logs from FF logs by having to prove that boss dots snapshot. That was a funny conversation. Chilano says yes, but not if people are leaving during it. I agree. Exactly. Imagine doing Delubrum Reginae, where the boss is just, you know, you're just 2/3 of the people you should be. And they're just, like, the bosses are not scaled down. It takes way longer. And hey Angel, I hope you're doing well. Should we take a look at this clip from Fila then? So the point was we should focus on the pulls. Specifically the first and second trash pack was highlighted, as I understand. So mainly the first bit of the video then. Ah, you were in your housing area. And your instant portal broke. Right, you pulled your card, that is good. Where's your card? There's there. Not much you could do, the pull started quickly. Dots are nice. You could use Celestial Intersection. You drew your... Actually, this was something that we talked about previously. I can't remember if that was also Fila's clip. But there was this minor arcana thing, that it wasn't getting drawn. And there's the Earthly Star, that is very good. There's the Exaltation, that is good. You might want to use divination. That might be difficult when you're doing other things. You have not used celestial intersection. Oh, I was like, is light speed not on your bars? And then it's because I couldn't see it because of what you were clicking. Because that was what I was about to say, is that you should probably use light speed now. Wait, what did you cast there? Exaltation, gravity, another gravity. Looking for someone to play a card. That is scary. That was like latency stuff. So just like look at this. So here, let me just see if I can find it exactly. Here is a spell queued play. So Fila is just clicking play, it's going on the red mage, that is good, it's a ranged card. The card hasn't played yet. Fila is already pressing draw. If you were at a faster latency, I'm pretty sure you would have drawn the card instead. But because you're not, it actually did both things. And then you played... Ooh, you should have done a redraw there. You should also... there's a divination, another draw. Well, you want to play that card. You redrew it. There was a 50% chance that you would get the sun again. And you didn't even get the card you wanted. You got a ranged one. I'll rewind the clip to watch again in just a moment because I'm focusing a lot on the cards right now. But yeah, so there's a... And you also did manage to use your celestial intersections throughout the fight. That is good. You used most of your cooldowns as you needed to. It was just in a little bit wonky way. So, just in this pool, there's the thing is that... So you played the first card, that's good. You should probably have used light speed before exaltation, I think would have been a good thing, because then you could have more easily like actually thrown out all of your healing cooldowns that you wanted to give the tank, and then you could more quickly get to play your cards on the DPS. When you drew the... let me just rewind to that. So you play card because it's sun. You choose the best target, play, draw a new card. You don't want this card. You don't want this card because it has the wrong sign. You will want to redraw this because it has the wrong sign. Even though it has the wrong type, you would rather redraw it. If you like, because the thing is, if you redraw this, you are guaranteed 100% chance to get the correct sign that you want, which is going to lead to you getting a speed boost, like an attack speed boost, which is good. And also gives you the opportunity to get a damage boost if the third card is right. We will never know if it would be, but it could be. So you would rather redraw this, so you play it. Because, so the thing is, it was half correct, right? So it had the, it was the correct type of card for the player, but it was the wrong type of card for you. And weirdly, you as the astrologian should prioritize getting the right card for yourself. What was that? Oh, my game crashed. Well then. We'll get back into the game a bit later. Let's continue. Sorry about that for anyone that got a jump scare of a Windows error notification. But right, so you want to be sure that the card you're playing is for you, not for the DPS or the tank. You're playing the cards for yourself. And then you get the third card. That one does not have a good target because it's either for you or the tank, and you don't really want it. It would be better to play it on yourself, because Astrologian actually does very good AoE damage, and you would get more value out of the card than the tank would, assuming you're spamming gravity. So you should play the Spire on yourself in this case, is my recommendation. And then just, do Astrodyne. What you do instead is you go, well, I don't have a melee card, and then you redraw with a 50% chance of getting the wrong card. And if you had gotten the wrong card, then you would have lost even more potential damage. So the thing is, the reason why, this is actually exactly the reason why, exactly the reason why you don't want to redraw is because, so here, you're lucky you get the correct card, so you just play it. You draw the card, it's a ranged card. You look, there's no range, so basically, you're looking at this, you're not looking at this, you're looking at this small part that does not include yourself. And going, there's no range that needs a card here. You should be looking at the full picture and say, I could use a card on myself. Because Astrologian actually does fine damage, especially on AoE. At least fine enough that you would be able to do more with this card than the Paladin. So you should play this on yourself. And the reason why you should play it on yourself is because if you redraw it, I think we went over these probabilities last time. If you have two of the same sign and you draw the good sign, if you draw the good sign, like one you want, and you redraw, there is a 50% chance that you get the sign you already have, but there's actually also a 50% chance that the card that you get is still wrong. Like, if you have a ranged card and you're like, I want a melee card, let me redraw, there's a 50% chance that the redraw is also ranged. And there's also a 50% chance that the sign is the wrong one, which means that if you redraw when you have the right sign, and two signs that are identical, there's a 25% chance that you get a worse card, as in you still have a ranged card, but now the sign is the sun, so the solar sign. A 25% chance that you get a card with the correct sign and it's a melee card. And a 25% chance that you get a melee card, but it's the wrong sign. And then there's a 25% chance, which was the one that you got here, that you get the wrong card but the correct sign. So basically, the reason why you only redraw when you have the wrong sign is because the chance that the card doesn't get better when you redraw is really high, and the chance that the sign gets worse is really high. Like, the odds are not in your favor. So it's better to just look at your sign. Like, don't look at this. Don't look at don't look at the fact that you got the EVA. Look at what sign it got and look at what signs you have, and then go, do I want this card? And if you say yes, then you go, okay, who should I play it on? And then make sure to include yourself. That would be my advice. Yeah, it's not easy. The thing is, I'm pretty sure what happened is, because I've done this too, is, so you play your bowl, you play your bowl, you've had time to acquaint yourself with this card, you've had this card for a while, you know what you're going to do with it when you have time, you have already planned, I'm going to use this on Edon Rivers here, and then you draw a new card, and then you go, oh, well, that is a melee card, I know what to do with this, and because Astrologian is as Astrologian is, you're a bit stressed, there's a lot to look at, there's a lot of things to take in, you're also maybe worried about the tank. You go, well, it's a good card, I'll play it. And then you play it. Lakey says you will likely do more damage with the ranged card than the samurai will. That one is a bit iffy. It depends on the samurai, actually. If the samurai is actually good, then they're probably going to be able to do more with a ranged card than an Astrologian will. But that means that you have to be looking at the samurai and going, is he playing good? Like, is that samurai actually a good player? In a random dungeon where like the stakes are not super high, my recommendation is to just blankly go, well, I'm a ranged and samurai is a melee, and just go from there. But sometimes the samurai will actually be able to do more with a ranged card than a healer will. Specifically an astrologian, a white mage or sage might actually be able to do better than a samurai with the card, but you wouldn't have a sage or a white mage to play it on in a dungeon. But yeah, my advice is when you're deciding whether you're going to use redraw or not, just look at the signs. Just look at this bit over here. So there's the 3 signs that you have, and then there's the new sign. That is all you need. Then when you've decided on keeping a card, then you look at what the card you actually got is. That would be my advice. And I know it's not easy. Look at the floor. That is also something you should do. Look at the floor. Yeah, that was the first pull. I don't really have anything on the healing, because it seems like the paladin was pretty good for the most part, so there's not really anything to add there. I would say use light speed a little earlier, so that you have more, like, an easier time getting to getting to divination. So this second pull, you don't have divination or light speed, so that gives you some space differently. You draw your minor arcana, that's good. You have a lot of crowns, so that is something you would want to play when everything's stacked up at some point. There's the celestial intersection. With this many mobs stocked up, you didn't need to use combust on this guy, I don't think. But that's fine. You could play your bowl on the red mage. You used Macrocosmos, that's good, better than not using it. Play the card. You draw a new card. Not yet. Paladin is alright. You could draw a new card. You draw a new card, good. That one goes for the samurai, of course. Or maybe not. Maybe you keep it for the boss fight. That could make sense. When you see at the map, the red mage was way behind. Oh yeah! Is that... Let me just see. Oh! I think you messed yourself up with that, Fila, because the red mage was not actually behind. My recommendation is zoom out your minimap a bit. Look at this. Let me see if I can actually see them on your screen. The red mage is right there. And there they use this. I don't know why, but they used displacement for some reason and jumped away. But they're still in range. You can still play the card and they can still attack. So I would say zoom out your minimap a bit if that's what you were looking at. The fact that they're in range is fine. Like, that is good enough. That is enough information. But I can see why you would do it. I would recommend zooming out your minimap a bit. Then it doesn't look as ridiculous when a red mage backflips away. But yeah, here it makes sense. So just go, nah, I'm just keeping that card. I'll save that card for the boss fight. I'll play it on the samurai immediately when we pull. Or something like that. Yeah, like that. I might do that myself. Besides, you can see your card is ready now. And divination is ready now. I'm just going to go through this real quick just to see what you do about it. You use light speed. Very good. Divination there. Card play. Yes. And Astrodyne? Wait, what did you get? What card did you get? Let's see. Get that. You drew another arrow. So, did you redraw that? You probably didn't. Minor Arcana, good. Oh, look. I have a melee card. I'm gonna play it on the Paladin. Like, it's the same. It's the same thing as I talked about before. Yeah, so I'm not going to like bonk you on the head for that. But it's the same thing as before. Look at the sign, figure out whether you want the card, and then play. You say skip it, that's fine. Usually the boss fights are not, like, unless something goes horribly wrong, it's not the most exciting. Like, it's usually similar to an easier raid boss, right? So we go again. Aspect of Benefic, that's good. Start up. You could use Celestial Intersection here on the tank. But I wouldn't be surprised if you've already learned to do that since. You could draw your Minor Arcana. You could play a card. You could use Lightspeed. You could use Divination. There was Lightspeed. Gravity. Play a card on the Red Mage. Very good. Draw a new card. Great. You could use Minor Arcana. You shouldn't use Minor Arcana because you have cards right now and you're playing them. You drew the perfect card. That one goes on the Samurai. Drew a new card. You want to redraw that. You drew your Minor Arcana. That's good. You use Divination. Great. Do you redraw? No, you don't. You want to give that Paladin maximum damage. No risk getting you maximum damage. And then Astrodyne. That's fine. So the reason why you want to redraw that is because you could have had the perfect card. It could have been a melee card for the Paladin, or it could be a ranged card. But if it was the third sign, like the one you were missing, then you would get an extra 5% damage. And you would still have a card, which would be better than Astrodyne without the damage. Also, very good, very good. I see you took an extra step in to make sure that the collective unconscious actually hit the tank. Very good. Fila says, at the second boss I gave 2 cards to the Samurai. I think I've done that myself too. And just given an extra card to the same person because I'm like, oh, that's also a ranged card. You get that. And then go, oh wait, they already had one. But that can happen. You get better at planning that with practice. But yeah, Gazel says so much thinking. There is a lot of thinking here. A lot of things to look for. Oh, there's a lag there. I don't know if that was just the recording or if you lagged in game as well when you did that. Now you want to redraw that. I think it looks like you're stockpiling that for the boss fight, but you do want to redraw that. I don't think I have anything to add to this pull. So I'm just going to check whether you do that by the time the boss rolls around. I'm guessing that you don't. Because, like, the way you've done earlier. So I'm just going to check that and then we'll skip through the boss. There's the light speed. Play the card. Draw a new card. That is good. Who are you going to play? Gonna play it on? Oh, you redrew it. I just want to highlight. You had a melee card with the correct sign. You could have given it to the tank. You redrew it and got another melee card, but now it has the wrong sign. Like, this is actually the worst case scenario because you wanted a ranged card. So this is actually like a perfect showcase of why you don't want that. Then we just disregard the part where you played the second card on the Samurai also. Undraw, don't undraw. But yeah, exactly. It's more so that I think in this case, Fila, it was not so much that you were looking at the colors and not the signs. It was more that you were very optimistic. You were like, I could get a better card than this. And then the odds were not in your favor. But yeah, you know it. I've mentioned it. So I'm going to skip through this a little bit. Load! There we go. And we have 2 more packs. You said to focus on the trash packs, so we just have the 2 last trash packs to look at. And let's see, you have the big party here again with everything. You have a very good card. Very nice. And Earthly Stars up. Exaltation came up. Lightspeed, yes. So I said this at the beginning of this review as well, but I would say use Lightspeed first, then Exaltation, just because Lightspeed will make it easier for you to use Exaltation. You do the hyper draw play trick again. It looks really weird to double weave on latency. Like really, really weird. Like it looks like you're just like clicking both things and then they happen in like the order, but it looks like you're queuing up both at once. It's really, really scary. See here? I think what helped you here was you were looking to it looks like you were about to play the card on the red mage. So you draw, you're about to target, you're like you can see the mouse go, oh, red mage, wait, they have the spire. Guess I'll redraw then. Maybe I can get a card for the paladin. Incidentally, it leads to an even better card, but it would have anyway because the card you had was bad. Like you didn't want to play that either. But like there you were, your strategy actually just happened to play out well for you. Yeah, but yeah, like we can. The thing is that it's not a bad idea to have a consistent strategy to do it. Like if you can follow the strategy, that is not a bad thing. It's just better if you have a more consistent strategy, because you don't have very much time to think when you're an astrologian in a dungeon. You don't really have time to do that. So if you just like know intuitively what to do with every card, then you can go really quickly, and you kind of need to have that that level of skill with your card plays for it to work well. Oh, there was a swift casted aspect at Helios. Oh wait, so let me see here, because a lot of that stuff happened here where I was focused on something else. You're spamming sprint to get it before you enter combat. That is actually really smart. I do that sometimes too. If you ever play with me or are like see me on stream, even if I'm like tank, I will sometimes run dangerously close to the mobs without doing anything, spamming sprint to make sure that I get sprint out and then enter combat. This is something we also talked about earlier with Shadow's clip. So you put up the aspect at Benefic, and there's Macrocosmos. And Horoscope, Gravity, Swift casted aspect at Helios. You could have done the Horoscope Swift casted aspect at Helios while you were running with the tank if you wanted to. But yeah, that is how you would do it. It's not as good to use it in the middle of the pull, but if you deemed I need this for this pull, then you'd have to do it now and not later, because the region will not help you if the tank is nearly dead, and you don't have time to set up the horoscope and all that later if the tank is nearly dead. So that is very good. You also have the Lady of Crowns to spend. You draw a card, and you want to redraw that. You probably don't. Oh, actually you do, because you wanted a melee card for the samurai. Smart. Very smart. An Exaltation is ticking, so you don't actually need to do any. You use Celestial Intersection, that's fair. Good, because it was like ready anyway. Draw a card, and Samurai's card just ran out, so you could play it, but the fight is almost over. So that's good. You're waiting for your buff, like for the fight to end, so that you have more on the boss fight. Yeah, I think the one thing, now I'm skipping the rest because you said it was specifically the dungeon, like the trash packs that we were looking at. as I said, the main thing I would suggest is if you use light speed earlier when it's available, like you're using it on the first pack alongside divination, all that. If you use light speed like 1 GCD sooner, so before exaltation, then it might be easier for you to fit everything. And then there's the thing about using, like, looking at the signs on your cards instead of the color of your cards. If you do that, then I think it'll go a lot better. Then, like, the thing is that if you just have to look at the sign to decide whether you want the card, then you don't have to look here, which means you can react faster. You just look, do I have that sign? And if the answer is yes, then you redraw. If the answer is no, then you don't. And then you go, okay, who do I play it on? And if you have a melee DPS that seems to be really popping off, then you can give them a ranged card. It's probably better than playing it on you. That's good if you don't have any ranged DPS in the group. If you have a ranged DPS, you give them the ranged card, of course. Similarly, if you draw a melee card, if one of the ranged DPS is doing really, really well, give it to them. Otherwise, give it to the tank. Because melee DPS DPS jobs tend to do like a lot of damage, and they might have more front-loaded damage than the tank or the healer. So, like, you know, judge it as you go. You can also just go, well, I'll just play my ranged cards on ranged and play my melee card on melee. And if I run out of ranged on melee, I'll just play it on someone. Fila says, I don't know how to tell if someone is doing well or not. Well then, you know, play your melee cards on melee players, play your ranged card on ranged players. If you run out of melee or ranged, play your ranged card on a DPS if you can. Play your melee cards on a DPS if you can. If you somehow run out. And then prioritize yourself last, of course, for melee cards, and prioritize the tank last for ranged cards. And Angel says, don't worry, Fila, you're definitely playing Astrologian better than me playing Black Mage. And see, that is also an important part, is that overall you played really well. Some Astrologians would like need to spam heal the tank because they're not confident in their toolkit. And also, exactly like he says, getting the card out is more important than putting it on the right player. That is true. As long as you play the card on someone, then someone is getting some benefit. So yeah, that would generally good advice. Look at the sign. If the sign is wrong, redraw. Otherwise, just play the card and just figure out who to play the card on. And if you don't have time to think too much, ranged on ranged, melee on melee. There you go. And you're a ranged, and your tank is a melee. I hope that helps you, Fila. We have actually another encounter from Licky, and we also have something from Gazel. So that is what we have left. So this is again Sage Licky. So I'm going to speed that up as well. By the way, Licky, you have a bunch of spirit bonded gear in your inventory. Why haven't you extracted it? There's a raid white. You had Kirakoli up for that. That's good. And there was Fizzes. Licky with no mods. And there you need to do nothing. Licky says, it's my old healer gear, just took off. Why haven't you extracted from it? You do know that it doesn't destroy the gear anymore, right? You did later. Okay. Oh, there was 2 that got hit. What you could have done there is you could have given one of them Tavrokoli, because often the tank won't need it, especially not on normal. And that heals for a little bit more than Ryuholi. Oh boy. Dun 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 dun. Maybe they would have lived if you gave them Tavrokoli. And there's the... Oh, wait, was that a double rest there? Swiftcast. Thin air. Yep, that was a double res. Yeah, well, that is how it goes sometimes. Oh, and the white mage used benediction for that. Did you use Caracoli in anticipation of the raid wide? Yes, you did. Great. Remember, raid wide dot snapshot. That is true, Angel. The real mistake was the Reaper standing out of position. It was more to say maybe Licky could have been a bigger hero, and made it so that they didn't even die. The unfortunate thing is when the healer's playing perfectly, no one says a thing. When the healer's is making a mistake, everyone can see it. I'm going to speed it up a little bit more. Right. Oh, for a second there I thought that Reaper might die. Here's a tip for this mechanic. Just a general tip. If you have a mechanic like this that places an AoE on your position, if everyone else is stacked closely together, you could actually, it's actually safer to stack with everyone else, because then it means that there's more space. By going like this, these three are taking up a lot less space than you are. This is not a problem in this case because everyone else is stacked, but sometimes if everyone is really spread out, it can actually be difficult to figure out where to place the second AoE. Just a note. Like it works for other dungeons as well. Like in Dead Ends, the first boss has this mechanic where it targets everyone with a spread marker. No, with AoEs that chase you around, like place 2 or 3 of them. If you stack with someone, then you have half as many, and the thing is, the mechanic that follows immediately after is the triangle where you have to stack with someone. So like, it just solves itself, right? DPS not using mitigation and die is always a healer problem. But yeah, again, it's minor things, right? I don't know if there's much else, actually, I wonder. You actually used Lucid Dreaming earlier here, so that was good. Oh boy. That one I would probably have used Tabra Holy on. Angel says, funny thing, that tank buster in Savage hurts like a truck or gets snapped super early. Huh. Well, you could test that by using your defensives a little earlier, like extra early. Power from beyond! I'm pretty sure there's a different boss that we've fought in either Shadowbringers or Endwalker that uses sticks as an attack. Wait, isn't it Zodiac? It does that? I think. Angel says, just to give an example, Rampart or Shadow Wall plus TBN plus Ablation, and I still get nuked to 0. Oof. It is pretty funny with Panheimer. I remember that I saw that mechanic on the first extreme in Endwalker, and went, it's almost like they were like, we've made this ability called Panheimer. We need a mechanic to show how good it is. It pretty much trivializes the mechanic on normal. And the White Mage with Liturgy of the Bell would do that too. It's unfortunate you don't have that on the first trial normal, at least. in the regular playthrough, but I'm assuming that it is equally incredibly powerful on Extreme. Let me just rewind a little bit here. Just check. Oh. So what I'm looking at is lucid dreaming. So, right, you should use lucid dreaming now. There it is. Just speeding up back to where we were. So the fight is about to end, so there might be less motivation to worry about lucid dreaming, but you should use lucid dreaming right now. There it is. Oh, the summoner. Oh, double kill. I think the quality got scuffed a little bit by me jumping a little bit too much. But overall, it was good. The only thing that I had was like, maybe there were some things you could have done to like slightly overperform. Like, for example, going, oh, that Reaper has a Vuln stack. He doesn't seem to stand very safely. I should use Tavro Holy on him. Maybe he'll live. Things like that, but not necessary, right? Like, you could just rest and it's just normal. You didn't lose because of it. Yeah, I think it was again like the... mainly the MP thing. You had really low MP near the end, right? Let's see. Matthew says this tier has a bunch of those kinds of reference. P9 has is named after the first attack in the extreme, and P12 has the same name for the summon ads. Oh. We are probably in the room where his creation was decided. Very likely. Not using lucid dreaming could affect your co-healer. True. But yeah, basically, I think Gazel mentioned this earlier, but just like consider like clicking lucid dreaming when you reapply your dots. Using lucid dreaming too often is worse than using it too rarely. Is like my advice on the matter. Just use it on cooldown after the first one, and don't worry about it. Exactly. If you're always casting, then you will need the MP. Just spamming doses as a sage. Just spamming doses and nothing else, just endlessly, costs 9,600 MP per minute. With no piety, you're going to recover 4,000 of that. So that still leaves 5,600 on the table that you need to deal with. If you use lucid dreaming, that reduces it to like... Let's see... 1,000 something. Like close to 2,000. And then if you use your Adder Skull, that gives you 2,100 extra, which actually makes your MP generation positive while spamming doses. So that's why. If you had Piety, it would be less of a problem. If you used, if you had spell speed, it would become more of a problem. Like the 9,600 MP assumes 0 spell speed, and you probably have some spell speed. Emia says, how do you record? I'm streaming and I usually record with OBS. You have very little speed. That is good for Sage. You probably have some. Emia says, I'd love to send a clip, but have no clue how to record. OBS is free. So if you just download OBS, try and open it, then you can there's like a start record button. You can just like try and see if you can make it set up so that you can see the game, and then just try and record for like 10 seconds. Stop record and then see what it looks like. And you can see if it's working. If that's not working, like try and mess around with it a bit. There are some people on the Discord that know a lot about OBS, so maybe they can help you if it's not working. Angel says, wasn't there an issue with White Mage before where they were negative on NP with higher spell speed? At the start of Endwalker, using Afflatus Misery, or rather using Lilies, for the sake of using Afflatus Misery was a DPS loss. The reason for this was hilarious. So, in Shadowbringers, Afflatus Misery, so the Blood Lily, did 900 potency of damage, which sounds good, but it requires you to spend 3 lilies to access it, and then additionally use Afflatus Misery itself, which is 4 GCDs. Now, in Shadowbringers, Glare 1 did 300 potency of damage, which means that you could choose to cast 3 lilies and Afflatus Misery for 900 potency of damage, and a lot of healing, of course. Or you could use Glare 4 times and do 1200 potency worth of damage. So exactly, you were losing 300 potency for using your toolkit correctly. Now, in Endwalker, they fixed this. First, Glare 1 was nerfed to 290 potency. And then Afflatus Misery was boosted to 1200 potency. So now Afflatus Misery actually did more than 4 Glare 1s. So now the problem was solved, surely, right? Right? No, because Glare 3 did 310 potency, which means that Afflatus Misery was a 40 potency DPS loss. The only time it was worth doing it was if using your lilies was the only way to ensure that you had Afflatus Misery for raid buffs, because if you used it during raid buffs, it was worth it. Later, they made it so that you generate a lily every 20 seconds instead of every 30 seconds, and they made it so that Afflatus Misery did 1240 potency, so that it is exactly 4 Glare 3s, because otherwise it wouldn't be worth it, right? So, by that token, the way that White Mage had terrible MP management at the start of Endwalker was that your lilies were basically considered pointless, because they were a DPS loss to use in most cases. They didn't count, which means that getting access to the Afflatus Misery in the first place was considered a DPS loss, so you couldn't really consider the potential MP recovery they offered. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but back then, when you got 3 lilies over 90 seconds, that's still a lot. Those would amount to 1600 MP saved on glares that didn't cost anything every 90 seconds. So like 1100 MP saved every minute or so. Now that they've both buffed how many lilies you get and made Afflatus Misery worth it, that has actually flipped the script. You think Astrologian's MP management is good? May I introduce to you White Mage? So you have Lucid Dreaming, that is 3850 MP per minute. Then you have As Eyes, which is 7.5% of your MP per minute, because we can use it 1.5 times per minute. So that's 750 onto the stack. That is 4,600 in total. Then you have Thin Air, which is at least 400 MP per minute, assuming you're spending it on Glare. It could be 2,400 if you use it on Rays. But it's at least 400. So now we're at 5,000 MP per minute with Lucid Dreaming. And then you also have your lilies, which the lilies give you 1200 MP by virtue of costing nothing, whereas Glare costs 400 MP. So it's basically a free GCD as opposed to one that costs something. And Afflatus Misery also doesn't cost anything, so that's another 400 MP saved. So that caps the White Mage at 6,600 MP And then you also have your passive MP recovery of 4,000 passively with no piety, so 10,600. I think that's everything. And that should be significantly more than all the others. Let's see, 1,600 plus 4, so 2,000, so 2,750 per minute. Astrologian gets 1,000 per minute from their card draws, and then Astrodyne, that's 2,500 every 90 seconds, so that's 1,666. Which adds up to 2,666. Yeah, I remember that number. So it's actually like their, what is it? White Mage has 2,750 from their own tools, not including Lucid Dreaming, and Astrologian has 2,666. Like, it's 100 difference. Meanwhile, Scholar is like rolling around over there in the corner with 2,000. and Sage is over there with 2,100 from their Adder Skull, and then there is some Mata that they get every now and then. So it's a very clear winner with White Mage. But before this change, before all these changes to White Mage, at release of Endwalker, Azai's had a 45-second cooldown, so it was actually only 6.66% MP per minute. And then there was Thin Air of 400. And because the lilies weren't worth it, that means that White Mage had like 1,000 MP recovery per minute, if they used their tool as best as they possibly could. Which is not great, right? It's not great. When the second place for worst had 20% of their MP every minute by just snapping their finger and using Ether Flow. Right, so the final clip we have is from Gazel. I believe there's no sound. And my game crashed, so we'll have to fix that in post, so to speak. We'll do that after. Let's see, so Gazel said beginner Dark Knight in Castrum Meridianum. I hope that you skipped the cutscenes, otherwise this is going to take a while. So the first bit here is a really big pull. You need to use grid. There's the grid, good. Nice, unleash before you move on, that is good. And there's another one. Oh, now I see what you mean with the circle arrow, circle cursor. That's fine, don't worry about it. That is actually nice, then I have a better chance of seeing where your mouse is. So you've used Rampart and... Oh, no, actually that is a really good timing for arm's length, I think. No, wait, you just used Rampart. Maybe that's a little overkill, maybe not. Well, there isn't much left to pull after this, right? Wait, there's 2 packs still. Well, you're not going to need many cooldowns to the boss. Now you have Shadow Wall for that. Did you also use Reprisal? There you did. So the scary thing here is, so the way that you normally do this is that you would use Shadow Wall, and then when Shadow Wall ends, you use Reprisal. So you should use Reprisal now that you don't have a cooldown, so that you can still blunt some of the damage, because now that you have no cooldown left, you're taking full damage instead of part damage. Basically, as a tank, when you're taking a tank buster, the purpose is to minimize the damage to a point where you can live it and recover. But when you're taking like consistent damage, the purpose is to reduce it enough that you and the healer can deal with it. Once that is accomplished, don't use any more. usually, in most cases, there are exceptions, but most situations in like a dungeon pull, like a big one, you only need to use Shadow Wall or Rampart. At higher level, you also use TBN because Dark Knight, but usually just one of them. And then when that big cooldown ends, you use Arm's Length or Reprisal to deal with what remains, because hopefully most of the pack is done. Like, you're at the point where Fila's going, I actually have a card, but I'm going to keep it for the boss, for example. Like that is where you go, oh, well, I don't need to use any cooldowns, maybe. Or just a small one will do, like Reprisal. Did you know you can solo this boss with Scholar? So this seems very good. The Black Heft. Like overall, there's not much to say because it's a boss fight. If you're using the Stalwart Soul combo, as long as there's basically 2 targets that you want to fight, then you're doing absolutely everything you can. At level 50, Dark Knight doesn't actually have very much. Yeah, the Ruin Spam. I'm just going to hop through that because there isn't much happening there. So there's a big pull. You also apparently used Shadow Wall and Arm's Length on the boss fight. Let me just see what happened there. I don't think you needed that, but it's hard to say in retrospect. I would say if you had just used Shadow Wall, that would have been fine. Especially because Rampart is going to be up shortly. But yeah, so the general recommendation I would give Gazel is 1 cooldown at a time. 1 cooldown at a time. So you use Shadow Wall. If you realize that's not actually enough, then you can use another cooldown. But you know, let the mobs hit you a little bit. See if the healer can take it before you use another one. Because the thing is, if you use 2 cooldowns, then you don't have those 2 cooldowns for the next pull, which is here. You want to use Rampart, and then 20 seconds later you want to use Reprisal. What you do is you use both. Now the thing is, if you don't know, so I've gone over this with healer as well. The reason why I recommend playing White Mage as your first healer is because as you are in full control over what healing happens, you're likely to get really well acquainted with how much healing you do and how much healing you need to do, because any healing that comes out is typically from you, with some exceptions as you get to higher level. As a tank, it can be very difficult to gauge how many defensive cooldowns you need. Like, at a glance, how much damage do these mobs do per second? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. By the way, there's 8 of them. How much do they do? Who knows? So the only reason why I know that Rampart is enough for this pull is because I've done this pull with just Rampart and found that in most cases the healer's fine. So the only way you can learn how many cooldowns you need for something is to try. My advice is, when you reach your destination, like where you stop to cleave the mobs as a tank, you use 1 big cooldown. Big cooldowns means Shadow Wall or Rampart. When the duration of Rampart or Shadow Wall is running out, so like they're reaching like 1 second left or so, then you use the next cooldown. But you should preferably not use Shadow Wall and Rampart in the same pull, because just one of them is going to tide you over the majority of a fight. And you're going to need 1 per pull. And typically, it's pretty common that a dungeon pull takes around 1 minute from start to finish. So if you have a defensive cooldown with a 2-minute cooldown, then if you use it on the first pull, you won't have it for the second pull. So, and Rampart has a 90-second cooldown, so that one will also not be available immediately. So This is the concept that I call, I don't think I'm the only one that calls it that, but I call it defensive cooldown cycling. Basically, only one defensive at a time. You just pay attention to the duration of your current defensive cooldown. When it's running out, you use the next one. The only one where there might be reason to use it at a slightly weird time is arm's length, because arm's length itself doesn't do anything defensively. What it does is it gives the enemies a debuff that makes them weaker, but the enemies have to attack you first. So it takes a little bit to take effect. So there's nothing wrong with, like, if the enemies are really giving you a hard time, if you like use arm's length when the rampart is like 5 or 4 seconds, so that arm's length has a chance to activate. Like, that can work. I'm pretty sure, like, I have a video called 6 Great Tips for Tanking. Let me just see if I can find it. Yes. I go over this defensive cooldown cycling stuff a little bit in detail there. So the important thing to just to remember when I say this, Gazel, is if you're tanking like a raid boss, sometimes their tank busters require several defensive cooldowns to live. Case in point, Angel earlier who said, oh yeah, the tank buster from P11S kills me through Shadow Wall and TBN and Oblation. Which is 3 defensives, technically. So, just remember that it's complicated, but typically in a dungeon pull context, lead with one big defensive cooldown, which is Shadow Wall or Rampart, and TBN, if you're Dark Knight. And then, when the cooldown is running out, use a small one, or smaller one, like Arm's Length or Reprisal. And, like, use TBN on cooldown when you have it. It gets a little complicated with the other tanks, because the other tanks, their short cooldown defensive is pretty strong too. So you can do, like with Warrior, you just do Bloodwetting and nothing else, and when Bloodwetting is about to end, you use Vengeance. And then when Vengeance is about to end, you just kind of wait for Bloodwetting and just take the damage straight to the face, because you'll be fine in like 4 seconds. Well, Sharo, you wouldn't be able to show the music because the music only plays for you, right? Oh wait, it is a 2-seater. We'll look at it when we're done with this clip. But yeah, big defensive when it's running out, small defensive. And then you go from there. Like that would be my advice. And I'm guessing that you're going to do this for the rest of the dungeon. Notably, you're not dying, so it's more like, now you know. The reason you're not dying could be because Castro Meridianum is very easy. It could be that your heal is really good and is carrying. It could also be that the mobs are mostly dead by the time your 2 defensive cooldowns have run out, so it's not a problem. Like, actually, this pull was probably a good example, because you can see here, you used Shadow Wall and Arm's Length on the boss fight before. You used Rampart and Reprisal on the fight you just had. So now you don't have any defensive cooldowns. You just have to eat it. Fortunately, there's only 5 mobs. And it seems like your healers got you covered. They have Soteria up. And the mobs are not super strong. But this is exactly the reason why you like stagger them like that. And you'd only use 1. If you had only used 1 for the boss fight thing, you would have had Arm's Length potentially, or Reprisal, which was better than nothing. But again, no danger, you didn't even drop low. Like, despite all of this, like despite all of those cooldowns being on cooldown, you were in no danger because Living Dead was ready. Like, Living Dead was there if you needed it, so you were in no danger. Jammy Plays says, what do you think of using your danger button, like Living Dead, Hallowed Ground, etc., deliberately for dungeon pulls, for wall-to-wall pulls? I realize dungeons go much quicker if used properly. I think if you plan it so that the healer can somehow predict it, then that is a good thing. Like, just the other day, I did a dungeon as Sage, and we landed in Lapis Manalis, and with the first big pool, so there's the birds, and then there's the griffin, and then there's a big AoE pool. On the big AoE pool, I do as I always do. You can see in my Sage dungeon short, Kiraholi Haima, Paladin goes hallowed ground, and I'm just sitting there like, well then. But on the final AoE pull of the dungeon, which is also really big and really scary sometimes, they used hallowed ground again, but this time they used it like 1 second earlier, so I hadn't started doing anything yet. So I just saw, oh, hallowed ground, then I'll just wait 10 seconds with what I'm going to do. So if you're using your like invulnerabilities in a predictable way so that the healer can plan around it, whether that's either you're using it at an obvious time or you just say that you're going to use it, like communicate, then the healer can plan around it. Like, it's particularly problematic if you're doing it with Dark Knight, because Dark Knight needs the healer to let it happen if you're forcing it. Hello, players? How are you doing? But yeah, that would be my advice, is like, if you can plan it, then it's good. Just make sure you don't need it later. Like, you have to be confident and comfortable doing the dungeon, so you're not missing your invulnerability later if something goes wrong. Like, for example, as I said, this pull, there's nothing wrong with Gazel going into it with no defensive cooldowns, because Gazel had the panic button. That Living Dead was available. Martha says your guides have made me so much more confident in the jobs I play. Well, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm glad that you found my guides helpful. Thank you. Phil says hallowed ground is good, but can you use it maybe? But you can use it maybe twice per dungeon. The rest require to be close to dying to be worth using. Yeah, exactly. But as I said, if you communicate with your healer, some healers benefit from being able to go, oh, you're good? I don't need to heal you. Then that's just telling them beforehand, they can get some value. And hey, Vicels, we're reviewing some footage. Right now, we're looking at Gazel tanking Castro Merianum. Player says, keep your MP up and use Darkest Night. Well, Blackest Night in your cooldown rotation. Exactly. Well, you shouldn't actually... So you should not use TBN in your cooldown rotation. You should use TBN on cooldown and then use your other defensive cooldowns alongside it. TBN is the specific weird one about that. Because the reason why you don't stack defensives is because unless you need it, stacking defensive cooldowns actually diminish their value. Using a 20% and a 30% defensive cooldown will lead to something like 44% damage reduction total instead of 50%. But TBN is an increase, a flat increase to your effective health, which actually means that if you use Shadow Wall with TBN, then the shield is going to be more valuable. So TBN is uniquely has a positive relationship with defensive cooldowns. So you want to use it on cooldown. It also has a really short cooldown, so if you can afford it. Yeah, I believe this boss doesn't really have anything that requires a defensive cooldown, but it might have a tank buster. Right, Gazel does not have any sound on for those that have come in recently on the footage. My game crashed, so that's why we don't have any sound. So Rampart for the tank buster. Good strategy, generally good method. But as I said, like, this particular boss didn't require it. But again, I know that because I did the boss without using a defensive cooldown. I was like, oh, hardly does any damage. But yeah, use just on the TBN on your cooldown rotation. It's just yes, you should use TPN in your cooldown rotation. It's just that TPN should be used alongside all of your other cooldowns. It's just TPN on cooldown and then use your other defensives. The scary thing with Dark Knight at high level because of this is that you're more likely to run out of cooldowns if your group's damage is a little low. Because you just have less. But using TPN on cooldown maximizes the value you get out of TPN. Matthew says, on a shield healer, when a tank buster is about to go off, should I stop what I'm doing to shield the tank? Maybe. If you don't know if it's going to kill the tank, if it's not an extreme or a savage fight, so if it's just normal content, then no. Don't shield them. See what happens. If the tank is fine, then you know that you don't need to shield them in the future. If the tank died or nearly died, then you know that it might be worth shielding. As far as I know, unless like the tank has like vulnerability stacks or is doing something weird or is undergeared or something like that, then you should not need to shield them. Like just ignore it and see what happens. If the tank is fine, good. If the tank dies, then you can adjust accordingly for the future. But it usually requires something weird for it to be necessary. Yeah, it might. So in a savage fight, even an extreme fight, so like the newest extremes and stuff like that, doing it synced, there is a possibility that the tank might benefit from the shield, depending on whether the tank is ready for the tank buster. But usually you don't need it. Like, the best you can do is see what the tank does. Do they survive? If they do, then you know they didn't need it. If they die, then you know if you wipe that you have to help them the next time. And it's way more likely that they don't need your help than it is likely that they do need your help. So that's why I recommend just taking a chance and letting it be and see what happens. Gazel says, I would say put down your soil and see. I mean, you can use an ability to react. Like, if you're a scholar, you can put down sacred soil. If you're a sage, you could, if you're scared, you can use Kerakoli or use Tavrakoli in anticipation to give them an extra defensive cooldown. With White Mage, you can use Divine Venison. With Astrologian, you can use Celestial Intersection. Like, you can give them a little something, but the key thing is if you have to give them a shield with a spell, then that is actually a DPS loss. And if the tank didn't need it, then there was no reason for you to do that. But abilities is a different story. Right? I hope that makes sense, Matthew. Licky says, even in Savage, I've asked healers to not heal, so I just could heal myself. But yeah, that sometimes is also the case. One of the problems with tenacity as a stat for tanks, actually, is that the damage reduction you get from tenacity is hardly necessary. You don't need it in dungeons. It's like training wheels at best. In raids, most of the time, tanks can get by, like savage raids even, tanks can get by with like ability healing, ability cooldowns from the healer if needed, but they will not need spells to stay alive. If they do, it's like, oh, this particular mechanic is hitting really hard, and it's like supposed to be like that. Having tenacity is not going to change that. The same reason why you don't why a healer does not need to use a shield unless the game basically requires it. And actually, this is also something that someone mentioned earlier. I'm guessing it's a desperation thing, Gazel. But I don't think Darkmind does anything against these guys. Maybe if you get hit by the explosion telegraph there. But Darkmind only reduces magic damage. So it needs to have like the staff next to the damage. Dark Mind was just sitting there, so I thought it might as well. Fair enough. It's just, it doesn't do anything. I will be at the center during the proximity AoEs. Ah. Huh. I don't think people normally communicate that at all. It's just chaos. Wait, proximity AoEs? Do you mean spread markers? There's a tank buster, shadow wall, nice. And there you can see, so here the healer actually used Eucratian diagnosis just to be sure. They didn't need to. You didn't even take that, like that was a critical diagnosis, but you know. It was like, that was an example, you don't need to. Just based on what we were just talking about, I mean. And there's another tank buster, there's Rampart, very nice. You can see it does like 20% of your HP. It's surprisingly weak in this dungeon. Probably an itemable thing. And there's the proximity AoEs. Oh, right. Yeah, those don't do enough damage to warrant running off to the edge. And there's another tank buster, and they use reprisal. That's very good. Oh, and here comes the end, where it's just a DPS race, so to speak. Right. Let me just switch to this so I can log in again. Shoo. There you go. And the second AoE got skipped. Oh yeah, true. I just got confused because there's no sound, but I'm pretty sure the game crashed while I had sound off. Peleus says, I think healers should know the tank cooldowns so that they can help when needed. That way they don't expend their MP unnecessarily. In a Savage raid, you would probably like become acquainted with when your tank is using defensive cooldowns, right? Like you will learn, oh, he's using Shadow Wall on the first tank bust and they're using Rampart on the second. And on the second, they need a little bit of help because it does a lot of damage or something like that. Like you will learn that by observing them. Or if you're in a static, you will probably communicate with human words. We have people here. But there's a good idea. Like, this is also the reason why I say that one of the best ways to become better at your job or your role is to try other roles. Like, if you're a healer main, a really good way to get acquainted with how tanks react or how tanks play is by being the tank, right? Oh, right, just a moment. Also, this looks ridiculous. I'm just holding on to the tire. Robo says the secret is actually just using arm's length. I mean, if you use arm's length, that always helps. Like, the thing is, a lot of players don't even realize that arm's length is a defensive cooldown, aside from the knockback. But Gazel, I think you did really well in that dungeon. The only thing that I really had to add was the defensive cooldown cycling. But yeah, if you if you start playing tanks, you will get better acquainted with how you're supposed to be reacting with a healer. Like, you start to recognize what the tank can do. And if you play a healer, you will get acquainted with what the healer can do. So like you unlock more like perspective. You can see what others can do in the group. Just the other day, I did a dungeon where the healer was a white mage. I mentioned this on a recent stream as well, but let me say it again. The healer was a white mage, and they basically kept regen up at all times on me, the warrior tank, and they kept Medica 2 up on the party at all times. And if I lost more than 1% HP, they would start casting Cure 1 on me. I told them, like, relax, we as a group can heal too, don't worry about it. Like, we had a summoner in the group. Those Phoenix summons would just go to waste. Should I turn up the music a little bit? Would that help? But I told them that. I was like, I actually had a pull where I said, okay, listen, try and don't heal me this next pull. You don't need to heal me. They still healed me because they don't, like, I'm sure it was because they weren't confident that I actually could do it without their help. Like, they don't know what a tank can do, so they wouldn't risk it. So moral of the story, try other roles. It will make you better at your main. Like, if you just want to be the best white mage in the world, more power to you. But if you play just one tank and just like 1 or maybe 2 DPS jobs, preferably in different sections, like a mage and a melee or something like that, it will make you better as a player to do that. It's really powerful for learning to try the other roles. Gazel says, if a tank says so and the tank dies, definitely not your fault, right? As a healer, nope, not your fault. If the tank specifically told you not to heal them, then you did as ordered. And then it's you, the tank. Like, if you're the tank and you said don't heal me, then you're in the wrong for dying when you specifically requested no heals. But yeah, Gazel, just to reiterate, so I could have focused on a lot of different things in your run there. This time, I focused specifically on your cooldown cycling, because, like, you could imagine like a stack of priorities. So, like, defensive cooldown rotation or defensive cooldown cycling, depending on what you choose to call it, is one of the most important things to learn as a tank, especially when pulling in dungeons. It's way more important than knowing how to position the pack once you've reached your destination. So if you're not getting, if you need to learn that, then we focus on that. Then if you have a pull where it's going, like, you're doing defensive cooldowns just right, but you're pulling the packs kind of weird, then I would probably highlight that. If you're doing both of those things right, but you're never using sprint, then I'll highlight that. But you can see, like, the more minuscule the things you're, like, the more small the mistakes you're making are, the more minuscule the problems I will highlight. Like, for example, with Shadow's one where it was like, you forgot to use sprint on the last pull. Right? Because that was the problem that I could highlight. I think it looks good. Pileo says, your response should be just the floor tank. No tank should ever no tank should never tell you to. No tank should never tell you to not heal them. I'm guessing what you mean is a tank should never tell you to not heal them unless they're in an unsynced dungeon. Warriors, specifically warriors, if they use their defensive cooldowns right and the rest of the group are like delivering on damage, then a warrior can easily do a full AoE pull with no help from the healer in terms of healing, simply because Bloodwetting is overpowered. Paladin might be able to do it too if they're using Requiescate, because Requiescate also heals for a lot. But the difference here is that Requiescate is once per fight, and it heals for less than Bloodwetting will. Bloodwetting will come up at least twice in most fights. Requiescate will not. So Paladin might be able to do it without healer intervention if the Paladin is in a group with a lot of damage. Gunbreaker might not, is likely unable to do it without healer assistance. And Dark Knight, maybe if you have Living Dead, but Warrior can do it consistently on every pull if they need to, because Bloodwetting is so insanely overpowered. So like the thing is, I was telling that white mage, try and don't heal me on the next pull, because I was a warrior. I would not have said that if I was any other tank, because then I wasn't sure if I could do it, especially not when the healer wasn't attacking much. But I would not have said that as any other tank. And I only said that because I wanted to show them, like, if I had to, I would use every single defensive cooldown that I had, just to show them that you don't need to spam heal all the time. The tank can do stuff too. In fact, your tank might not need your help. So relax, right? Heal when you need to. Don't heal just because you can. That was the point of the lesson. Nothing else. And they didn't take the lesson, so. Robo says, I'm still a new player, but my healers love me. It is true, it truly is valuable. That's good. Because of arm's length, just to add, they said, remember to use arm's length. And arm's length is nearly as good as Rampart in terms of power. Arm's length is about 16 or 17%. That's fine, players. That's fine. Yeah, that is true, Gazel. There are sometimes party finders where it's 1 warrior and 3 DPS for expert roulette. That is really weird, by the way. If you need to put together your group with party finder for that, you would probably have gone faster through by just queuing and going in and getting it done. I'm pretty sure. Actually, I feel like there's something that... Speaking of party finder, I feel like there's something that I forgot. We were talking about the Lubrum Reginae earlier. And someone mentioned something about that. Might be a while. If you are in the chat, whoever said the thing about something with Party Finder and the Lubrum Reginae, it might help if you just repeat it. I can't remember where it was. I believe it was something like so I remember back in Shadowbringers when people were spamming the Lubrum Reginae for the relic weapons, there were like, actually I'll hop off so that we can hang out here, right? Let me just turn down the volume a little bit. Some players did this thing where they would have a prepared, like they would prepare an alliance raid for the Lubrum Reginae in Party Finder. And it would be like, you know, super maximum damage. Like they would require that you use the optimal essence, the optimal lost actions to do it as fast as possible, such that they could do it in like half the time. You could do that, but the thing is, to find 24 people to do that took like 30 minutes or more, typically. So often, unless you could get everyone to stay for multiple runs, it was faster to just queue normally. It's pretty funny. It was similar to how I said that there was this relic quest in Shadowbringers, where you needed to do either Crystal Tower alliance raids 15 times per weapon, or do Castrum Lagoslatori 3 times. People would put together full, like almost full Blue Mage groups to speedrun Crystal Tower, but the thing is that the time you saved by being in this super optimized group was almost always lost by the time it took to actually put together the group in the first place. Which is pretty funny. Hey Irika, I hope you're doing well. Matthew says, when I'm playing Scholar and the co-healer is a Sage, it's so hectic. I wasted deployment tactics once because the Sage overrode my shield. Yeah, my approach to that, if I'm Scholar and my co-healer is a Sage, is that I will typically just not bother to use my shields if it's not needed, because the Sage is going to use it offensively. Meanwhile, if I'm the Sage, I will be much more likely to use single target shields on players who need it, to maybe avoid overriding the entire deployment tactic if it happens to like overlap. Because the thing is, the Sage is using their shields because they need to do it for Toxicon. When you, the Scholar, are running between safe spots, you can just cast Ruin 2 and it's fine, right? The Sage can use Toxicon, but if they run out of Toxicon, the only thing they can do is maybe use Flamma or AoE. Or they have to like use Eucrasia and Diagnosis and shield up people, so like they're basically doing it as a filler while you're doing your shields defensively, but the Sage is going to do their part anyway. So as a Scholar, the best you can do is just try to avoid applying shields if there's a Sage. If you're a Sage, see if you can be like considerate for the Scholar, but honestly the Scholar should be the one who's watching out for you, because you need your shields for offensive reasons. But it's always a mess when it's double barrier healer, so the best you can do is try your best, right? Try and watch out for each other. Lemon says, gonna take a rest for a bit, even though I didn't talk much. It was a nice stream. Thank you, Lemon, and I hope you have a nice rest. But yeah, don't worry about the barrier thing. It happens. Irika says, I'm almost caught up on the MSQ, and I'm slowly making my way through a pandemonium. Nice! Yeah. But yeah, it's funny with these kinds of like optimized groups that you sometimes see in Party Finder where they're like trying to farm something really efficiently, but you could have queued for it normally, and the time it took to put together the group almost wasted more time than you would save. It's pretty funny when that happens. I could imagine nowadays, because of how Deliberate Regine like has 10 minutes of queue time before it just lets you in with whoever's queued, it might sometimes be worth it to just try to Party Finder it, so that you can get in earlier or with a better group. Yeah. That mount from the variant dungeon looks ridiculous, by the way. Also, Ymir, just takes practice to get the burst right. Irika says, I think I'm finally starting to get the handle of Gunbreaker. I may have watched your level 60 guide about 60 times this week. Well, I'm glad that it's working. It isn't easy, and the thing is, if you're practicing Gunbreaker mainly at like a striking dummy, once you've figured it out, what's going to happen next is you go into a dungeon, and then there's all the randomness of a dungeon to worry about. And then you have to learn that bit, right? If you're new to tanks, I can't remember if you've played other tanks, Arika, but if you are new to tanks, then that might also have a huge impact that you have to deal with the defensive cooldowns and stuff like that once you get into a dungeon. It's not easy, but I'm glad to hear that my guide helped you. Nikki says, not if you're farming 450 tomes. What do you mean? Like spamming expert roulettes for farming 450 tomes? Hello Rico, how are you doing? I've apparently become a snowman. Three DPS is better for farming that many tomes. Yes, however, if you're going to be spamming expert roulettes to get 450 tomes, like, unless you need those 450 tomes today, like right now, remember that if you do your daily expert roulette, you can finish it in 5 days. And I'd imagine if you're spamming it to get all 450 in a day, it's like maybe you need it for the weekly, like for the day, for the raid later that same day. In which case you're probably in a static. Maybe those 3 DPS can be from your static. And then you wouldn't need to do Party Finder. Matthew says, what's the best way to farm poetics in your opinion? I think it depends on how many you need. I think don't like a Realm Reborn and like generally non-Endwalker hunt marks, don't they give poetics when you kill them? That might be good, but the thing is that if you need the poetics at a time where there isn't a hunt train happening for that, then that's not super helpful. If you need a bunch of poetics, then a decent way to get a bunch is the main scenario roulette. So the key thing to remember here is that the daily gives 350, but Castrum gives an additional 100, Praetorium gives 150, and Porta de Cumana also gives 100. So you will always get 450 or 500 poetics from the MSQ roulette. So that one is pretty good. There's also another way, which is really, really weird. Okay? So, there is a first time bonus for like dungeons and trials and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, the first time bonus for the Shiva hard fight, so the part of the MSQ, I'm pretty sure that's like 60 poetics, maybe even 100. So the bonus is if there is a first timer in your group, so a sprout that is doing the fight for the first time for the MSQ, then you get like an extra bonus poetics. This fight isn't that long. So if you queue for it, and you happen to get a first timer, then this is possibly more efficient than the MSQ roulette. But if you don't have the daily, like if you've already done the MSQ roulette for the day, then doing this and getting the first timer is more efficient. Now, the thing is that this is random. You don't know if you're getting a first timer. But I'm bringing it up because I have a friend who, like, they made a new character on... so before there was data center travel, so like the regional data center travel, there was data center travel, or there was world travel, so you could jump between worlds on your data center. Before that, I had a friend who was on Light. They made a character on Chaos to play with me. and they reached level 50 and was like, well, I want a few full Ironworks Magitech sets, so I'll just farm Poetics. What they did was that they queued for, as Matho says, I just queue for a bunch of those A Realm Reborn trials and hope for a first timer so that they get the Poetics bonus, and it worked. Tristan says, I used to do a theochemical research facility. This one? Oh yeah, that is 150. Why is that? Oh right! This is the dungeon that doesn't drop any loot. This is the random dungeon that never drops any loot. Why is that 150? I mean, that is pretty good. If you can do it in like 10 minutes, that is actually pretty good. That is actually better than spamming this one and hoping for a random first timer. So yeah, very good idea, Tristan. A theochemical research facility. Just do that. If you can get a few friends, you get no tomes for unsync. Correct. You need to be synced. Like, grab 3 friends and spam it, so you don't have to wait in queue much. That would be effective. Rico says, giving Summoner a try. I've inadvertently become a caster main after getting Red Mage to 90. I really like its playstyle. Well, I hope you enjoy Summoner. It is a little, for the first many levels, it's maybe a little bit simple, and a lot of players would say that it stays that way, but I think it's okay. Hazel says, but you have to have friends. Well, either you need to have friends or you need to be a healer or tank so you get the Q fast. Fila says, isn't that just for the first time completion? No. So for these trials, when you enter a dungeon or a trial or something for the first time, and there is a first timer, you get a text down here, like down in the chat log, that says there is a first timer here. Expedient completion or something to that effect will lead to a bonus, and that bonus is slightly more Poetics and a second chance for your Wondrous Tales. The Aetherochemical Research Facility, so the rewards that it says on this menu is a reward you get every time you clear it. The rewards that are stated here are the rewards you get for the daily. That's why the reward screen changes when you've completed it. But anything listed here is every time. So this is actually a really good suggestion, Tristan. Matthew says that dungeon can be long if you're not in a party that already watched the cutscenes. That final boss can also be hard for new players if they don't pay attention. That is true, but they also reworked the boss. They actually changed the final boss in this dungeon when they made it possible to run it with trust. But part of the reason why there is a first-time completion bonus for this kind of content is specifically to compensate you for having to wait for their cutscenes and dealing with the wipes and stuff. But yeah, it can be long. It can be a little longer than some dungeons because the final boss is a little brutal. Queuing research facility in CF? What do you mean with CF? Would be risky as some players might not be able to do the mechanics correctly. Oh, see, Content Finder. Oh yeah, it's because it's called Content Finder on Japanese, right? In English, it's called the Duty Finder. It's okay, Gazel. I know what you mean. That is pretty funny. I was just a little lost there at first. It is called the Content Finder on Japanese. I don't mind. That's funny. I like that. Yeah. I suppose that would be a way. Just spam a theochemical research facility and hope that you get, like, on average, decent players. And then it should work. Yeah, I didn't actually think we would manage that. But somehow we managed to get through every single clip that I had on the list for today. I had a feeling that we wouldn't have enough time to do all of them. but apparently we did. I hope that those of you that I reviewed specifically found it helpful. Maybe you learned something you can take with you later. If you don't, that's fine. If you do, that's great. I just hope you learned a little something. Maybe some of you watching that weren't being reviewed also found it helpful. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you discovered that there's something you're doing wrong that you thought were like that you didn't know. Maybe something you didn't notice. Maybe you just learned something you could add to your arsenal. And yeah, I know that tea time on a Monday is really weird, but I can't do it on Thursday because of personal stuff. There's something that's getting in the way. So we're doing it today. This is specifically the time that I had time to do it. Because I had a feeling that it would be a shame if we didn't have a tea time, because it's been a while. Matthew says, the new player bonus is also 100 poetics if 2 people are new, I believe, but I'm not sure. It ranges from 60 to 100. That might be the thing. And Tristan says, from my experience, it's usually 1 wipe with new players, then I explain it and put markers for save spots, and usually it's a clear, and it's on average 10 to 15 minutes. I would say 150 poetics in 15 minutes is pretty good, right? Like 10 poetics per minute is decent, I would say, for like spammable stuff. Like not with like just remember your alternative is Castrum. Emia says, can you solo the Eden raids on normal? Some of them. Not all of them. I think E1 cannot be soloed. E4 can be soloed. It might be possible to solo E5. Umbra or Litany. I don't think there's anything... Wait, there are double soaks. I don't think you can solo... It depends. If the Litany mechanic... There's a mechanic in Litany where you need 2 players to soak something, and it's like multiple of them in quick succession. If you're only 1 player, you can't do it, so you're going to get Vuln stacks for all of it. If you can survive that and still do the fight, then it technically does not have an enrage. But it has a pretty strong tank buster for normal, so that might be tough. I would say if you can survive the raw damage, then it might be possible. The reason why I don't think you can do E1 is because it has like mechanics that are like a straight DPS check that I think might be difficult. But I'm willing to be like I would like to be proven wrong. I don't know with Umbra, but you could try Litany, see if you can solo it. Right. So I think this is also a pretty good point to like start to wrap up the stream. So if you enjoyed this stream, enjoyed what you've seen, and you would like to see more of the wonderful people in this community, there is a Discord community server that you can join. This also includes a room where I put the weekly schedule of what's coming on the channel, so you know beforehand that there's a tea time on a Monday. And there's also a room where I put an announcement whenever I do a stream or a new video is coming out or whatever, and it's usually set there before anywhere else. So that is the easiest way to keep up with new stuff being added on the channel. And then there's also all the wonderful people here that is also on the Discord. And Matthew says, due to the MSQ giving mountains of experience, I was able to solo the coils for a special cutscene change in Heavensward. It was such a hassle, but I was shocked to see voice acting in the last cutscenes. Oh yeah, that is true. With Endwalker, it should be possible to solo most of Coils of Bahamut. I suppose. Just by power of sheer damage. Yeah, if there's anything you guys would like to ask just before we end, this might be the time to do that. Other than that, tomorrow we have a daily stream in the evening where I'm playing Monk. And then throughout the week we have Monk guides coming out. And then on Friday, there's a video premiere on a video where I talk about why tenacity is actually really bad of a stat. Why it turns out to be bad. Angel says you can solo all coils. I think there's something where like you still need to burst correctly on specific bosses. But yeah, it can be soloed. In Shadowbringers, it was a lot harder to solo some of the bosses because you needed to do a huge amount of damage in a few seconds, and some players just didn't know how to do it, and I didn't know how to do it specifically, and I couldn't be bothered to practice it because it's just one time, right? Yeah, with Nail, it's like you need to burst such that you can skip the intermission. Well, not entirely, because tanks could survive the intermission itself. It's just that they didn't have the damage to kill the boss before the second phase's tank switch mechanic kills you. And also, this week, Sunday, we're having a Small Kai stream, so the Small Kai side quest. It's going to be it might be earlier than listed, but I'm not sure when I'm able to stream, so erring on the side of caution, I've set it a little later than usual. Right. That's everything I have. I think we covered a bunch of stuff. I hope you all learned a lot from the reviews, and I hope you had fun, and I hope you enjoyed the stream. Thank you all so much for watching, and good night, or good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye!